Coming. This is the Selectmen's meeting, Medfield Selectmen's meeting for February 6th, 2018. And we always start with a disclosure that we're video recording everything. We also start with a moment of appreciation for our troops that are serving around the world. So we'll start with that right now. Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's see, well, the first thing on the list here is Norfolk County Registry of Deeds will hold office hours on Thursday, February 8th, this week, 10 to 12 at the Townhouse. And then next executive session at the close of the meeting for the purpose of discussing land acquisition and pending litigation for Goldman versus Medfield Concom. And our first appointment tonight is with Charlie Harris, Medfield Car Show, request to use the Medfield State Hospital property. Charlie, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Can you maybe use our microphone up here? That allows the people that are watching on TV at home to hear what you're saying.
Well, thank you very much for hearing me tonight. Most of you know me. If you don't know me, my name's Charlie Harris. I'm the promoter and CEO of the Medfield on the Charles Antique Auto Show. This would be my third year here coming to Medfield. It's my 16th year putting on the show. It was previously in Elm Bank and Wellesley. And it's at the Medfield State Hospital grounds, which happens to be a perfect location for the show. I've talked with John Thompson, the groundsman over there, and we've worked together for the last 2.5 years or so, working this out. And the amount of property would be the same that we started with the first time. No changes at all on that. The hours of operation would all be the same. The traffic flow, everything's the same. Everything worked out fantastic the first year. And I see Gil here. Thank you, Gil. Gil took pictures and video and everything and put us on the local TV, which I thank you for. But everything that I'm looking for this year would be the same as the very first year that we had it. And it would be on the 24th of June, which is a Sunday. Operation hours are 9 to 4. A rain date of July 15th with the same thing, 9 to 4 hours. The original agreement we had requested permitting and trash removal, sanitation, all that. I have all the documentation for that. A request for, I believe, a $2 million bond or insurance policy, which I can apply, give to you folks as soon as the contract's signed. I already have one drafted. We requested between yourself and my 3 police officers. I actually requested a 4th one, so I have no problem with either 3 or 4. We had 0 problems, and last year we had, it was kind of hot, and we had many compliments, and we had a bunch of our folks run out trying to give the guys constant water and everything, but spectators and my staff all complimented the police department last year. So I've been incident-free for 15 years. This is my 16th, but been incident-free, no issues, no problems. John and I get together after both shows, and the properties were cleaned up to as I received them when I started the show. Like I said, I haven't had any issues at all. I've got the itinerary here, which was a request, so I've already had the itinerary drawn up. I don't see anything being different from the very first year, so if there's any questions.
Questions, guys?
Mike? Are there any comments from in many ways, it's the town administration that has to do things. Are there any comments from?
John Thompson here, as chairman of the Building and Grounds, is here if he wants to give his recommendation.
The only question I had was, I don't know if this came from you, John, or somewhere else. There was a question about just the setup and the flow of the show last year with respect to where certain vendors were set up. And I apologize for not having the details of it, but I think someone had raised the question about that. Do you know what I'm talking about?
So
Or are you just humoring me by nodding my head as I understand what the words you're saying, but I have no idea what you're talking about?
I'm John Thompson, the chairman of the Buildings and Grounds Committee for the State Hospital. Last year was unique in that Charlie's show was bumped as a result of the filming of the X-Men movie. And what happened was he was put into A1, which is the field to the east of the campus. And because of that, he had to do a lot of last-minute scrambling to figure out, his guy put in 24 hours before that show to put down on a map where the vendors would go and where the band was going to be and where the trophies were going to be. So it was sort of an unusual situation last year in that finding a home for the show in the last few weeks was really difficult, and they did a great job finding a home for it, getting it, and pulling it off. I don't see that this year. This year, because the movie I was already working on that in January last year, and I don't have a film project this year so far. We've had a couple of requests, but nothing has advanced that far. So this year would be more analogous to the first year, and if you remember the first year, a couple of concerns or issues that came up that was sort of a learning experience for us were dust control. With cars entering the service road and going in front of the trailer to park in A2. That was an issue. And then just, funneling the crowd through a ticketing process was an issue. But there were no real concerns on the core campus or with people wandering around. We didn't have any real security issues, and Charlie worked with Bob Meany, chief, on traffic flow and control, and I think that worked out well. And then lastly, my committee didn't touch on the cost. We wanted to leave that up to you all to, I think the first year was $2,000 for the day, which is what we charge people to use the property. And that was consistent with what we had seen for other car shows at Elm Bank and at the Endicott Estate over in Dedham. It was close to what they were charging for those shows. So my committee was in favor of having the show again this year, which will really be the second year of sort of working the kinks out with the dust control and seeing how it goes.
Does the Board of Health check out all the food handlers up there?
Yes, the Board of Health has to license all the food vendors for the show. And I think you also had a temporary liquor license or something.
Yes, I've requested one again this year
as
also.
part of that. But yes, Mike, the Board of Health does approve the vendors.
But I've had a liquor license all 15 years, 100% incident free. Getting back to the 24 hours, the gentleman who did that's here, and it was a little over 100 hours, but so I'd like to credit him for the 100 hours. But it's a big undertaking, trying to do an infrastructure and map out exactly where cars will go and won't go. And I have worked out a temporary plan for the dust control issue and, rerouting some of the cars that I can go over with you at another time. But as far as the fee, I gave you my contracts originally from Elm Bank and Wellesley, and those allowed me the use of eight golf carts, 4 bathrooms, unlimited electricity, and 4 or 5 days. So that I don't have here. My sanitation porta potties are almost $2,000. Electricity, I had to get rent generators the last 2 years. So my costs are a lot more up and above than it would have been at Elm Bank or at Wellesley. So, I agreed on the price, which is, I thought, a fair price. But,
Charlie, do you think that's still the fair price after you've had a couple of years of seeing the gate and how it worked out for you?
Well, the first year was a very productive year, was a good year, and for a transitional year, usually you'd lose quite a bit. But the show, for those of you who have gone, I put on an exceptional show. And The first year was very good. Last year was not a good year for many reasons. My cost factor was almost doubled. I took a hit of over $8,700 last year, because of the move and the timing of it and everything else. My spectators were down over 70%. Something happened to all my signage. It got lost in the transition and everything. So the first year worked out well, but as far as the pricing, if you add up what I have to put into it on top of what I pay you folks, it exceeds what I paid Elm Bank or anything, which, had a lot more to offer as far as, the property and the venue itself had 12 gardens, and it was a, horticultural center, so it offered a lot. This one here, we have issues. I worked with John. I went down with my truck and a few guys, and we helped clean up the area for the spring cleanup. So I helped in that area. Then we helped with mowing. I brought in a company. Last year, I had to bring in a company, and that was over $1,500 for the one day to mow. So, my expenses are way up there. My expenses were over $32,000 last year, and with the move and the way it was situated, it just didn't work out too good. But
We haven't talked about this, but I was gonna suggest that maybe we have the flat charge that we charged in the past and maybe work out some sort of sharing of, if there is a profit. Is that something that you'd be open to?
well, I discussed last year, an increase in. I discussed with John maybe working on a 3-year contract or something, and I thought I had gotten one, but I allowed for an increase and then a percentage each year increase. And, to do the show and to actually put out the kind of money that I put out, the people are relying, like I said, luckily I did very well in the previous, 13 years that I was over there, that the people followed me. But, last year no one knew what to do or where to go or anything, and they were confused, and the spectator issue and everything became an issue. But to try and get to a point where, it's stable and the people are going to know it's there. Everyone knows to book the day, the week after Father's Day for my car show, but I'd like it to be in one place, and I'm not there. The first year I did okay. Last year it was disastrous financially for me, but I can recoup that easily. But with good weather or whatever.
We haven't talked about it, but I guess I would be open to a multi-year contract if John's okay with that.
I'm concerned about a multi-year contract because
I guess
we don't know
not.
what we're doing up there yet. I think it's a year-to-year basis.
Plus, it's a license. There's no formal authority to contract as such.
Okay.
But I'm open to negotiating something. But it was difficult after the first year. If the second year had gone on fine, it would have been okay. But last year was disastrous, to say the least.
Well, I guess that's why I suggest some sort of percentage sharing for the town, because then you don't have to worry. If you don't make money, you don't have to worry about that. that
You'd
increase.
pay me back.
I'm Gil Rogers, and just one thing I'd like to add is, as we've been thinking about the future for the hospital and the use of the property, one of the things that we've thought about is that the lawn, the great lawn in the front, is an excellent location for this type of a show. It has a lot of aspects to it. Good ingress for people getting in, good flow of people getting out. It has different tiers, so it works well for a show like this. We've often thought that it could be used for other types of things like concerts or, outdoor performances of some sort. So, thinking of the direction we're trying to make for the hospital, we think that the show fits in really well, and it's a draw. People are, the feedback we've gotten has been overwhelmingly positive. People look forward to it, and we're sort of looking for things that will create a sense of of place or a sense of destination. I think it contributes to that.
But for what it's worth, I would agree with that. At this point, I think our business interest in this hospital property is promoting its identity, promoting people's awareness that it exists, and I suspect the value of that would well overwhelm whatever sort of a sharing we might work out with you. I think if we had if it was in everybody's interest to go for a longer-term contract and there was a reason to build an incentive for the town to want to do that, recognizing we can't right now anyway, I'd feel, that would be fine, but I think at this point, this is your third time. I think it was difficult all around to make the adjustment last year, and I hadn't fully appreciated, based on what you've told us tonight, I hadn't fully appreciated the cost impact on your operation. It was what we needed to do, but I think I probably underappreciated the impact that it had on your operation. So if you've had one good year and one not so good year, I think it would be reasonable to give you a shot at a track record here with a couple of years that work out well before, we try to get too aggressive on fees.
Well, the promotional end on my end this past year was difficult because we didn't know where we were going on a day-to-day basis, and it's such a short notice, and I wasn't able to get TV time or put any ads in the paper, not knowing what was going on. So that's why the spectators. The previous year, I think I had 2,600 spectators, and then I had 710 cars. This year, I had over 800 cars. So the enthusiasts and the participants come and have been. I started off the first show with I think 98 cars, 16 years ago, and I've increased it to over 800. And, we're talking Duesenbergs and Packards and every other, type of car. We've even had Jay Leno call in, and I've had Jay Giles personally come and bring 2 Ferraris and a Maserati. And so, I do bring a nice clientele to the show, and you're talking 3,000-4,000 people coming into Medfield and stopping to get gas and stopping at Cumberland Farms or wherever, or getting a pizza somewhere. So I think, and then the problem that existed last year was that the movie company didn't want these people strolling around, where the previous year you did want them to stroll around and see the beauty of the property or what it can have. I even had people call up that knew me from Elm Bank and said, would they entertain weddings and everything there? So it would in time, generate, you have the overlook where they could take the photographs and then have a tent down front. Mm-hmm. But you got the potential of the exposure of the property and the people coming in. And so, I think it's a plus for the town, and I love the property. I think it's a perfect fit for myself.
Yeah, I think to the point of the fee, Pete, I think it's the right instinct. I think I'm all for trying to maximize the value of town assets, but I think here for a one-day license for this type of event, I think the administrative hassle of trying to sort out and figure out what the profit is, what the percentage is, it's probably not worth the time. And I think Guz's point is a good one, that having people up there and people from other towns up there is a benefit too. So I for this kind of one-day thing, a flat fee is always simpler and doesn't leave us anything to be fighting over or disagreeing over. Kind of no hurt feelings at the end. We get our check, we're done, it's a good event, everybody's happy, move on to the next year.
And you're the first one that actually has done this kind of a thing for us up at the hospital. And I think that deserves appreciation as well. In terms of putting something that's recurring, that kind of people start to think about that place as the place where something like this happens, and it makes an impression in the public that we actually have the capability to do these things. So,
like I said, it's on a lot of people's calendars, and once we get into the 4th or 5th year or whatever, they've followed me this long, so I think they'll continue, and I think it'll only grow. And John and I have talked about it since the first day we met, and the potential is there, and it will only enhance, I think, what we can bring into the town.
Charlie, again, what's the date it's going to be?
Sunday, June 24th.
Yep, okay. So somebody want to make a motion then?
I would move that we grant Mr. Harris the license for the Medfield Car Show on June 24th or July 15th, according to the terms that he's described, 9 to 4 each day, and then you need access the day before too, is that right?
Day before and day after.
Yeah.
Subject to his signing an agreeable license agreement with the town.
Yes, subject to Mr. Harris signing a license agreement approved by town council.
Yeah, I brought last year's license, I brought my itinerary, I brought my discussions with John, everything. I have copies for all you folks.
Great,
Wonderful.
great. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Yep. Thanks very much, Mr. Harris.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it. Good luck. Now it's time for our appointment with Tony Santori, Senior Housing Study Committee. Discussion of Hinckley property, final report of the committee.
I thank the Selectmen for inviting the Senior Housing Study Committee to sort of make a final report. We met the Selectmen, I think, a year ago in January. The end of last month, we submitted our final report. I think there are going to be copies available through the web, Christine?
Should be up there now.
It is on the town website, so if you know how to navigate the town website, you can get a look at the final product. What I wanted to do was to run through quickly the updated slideshow that we used in October. And Frank, if you go to the next slide. One of the things we had a mission statement, Christine, was to define Medfield seniors, the demographics, their income, their current home equity, their housing preference, and their available Medfield housing options. One of the things we looked at was the demographics and population trends. And it comes as no surprise to anybody that towns are getting grayer, we're living longer. Shows the projections for the future. Next, Frank. This is a graph. The blue bottom one is, I think, age under 55 plus, and then the next colors red are 55 to 65, and then the green is 65 plus. And I think it goes out to, I can't read it from this distance, but I think it goes out to 2020 with some assumptions and predictions. And you can see that the 55 quadrant on the last slide there, I think it's around 40% of the town is going to be 55 or older. So we've got a growing population. Next, Frank.
Looks like 50 or older.
50, okay. Next thing we looked at was the household incomes for seniors by age. And you can see that as you look at the older cohort of seniors, their salaries kind of drop down. People who are 55 to 65 are still working, so their salaries are going to be pretty hefty. And you can see there that it shows that they're 150,000 in 10, and then in 20 it's predicted to be 174. So I don't think those are the kind of seniors in town that really have a housing issue. Next, Frank. This is the projection over time of those different age groups. And it also shows, next, Frank. This was the important part of the study, was to find out what is the assessed value of the senior 55 plus households. And there's 2,075 households in Medfield. And we broke it down by age groups, 55, 64, 65, 74, 75 to 84, and 85 plus. And the number of households, and then the assessed value, which we took from the town data. And you can see as people get older, they've probably bought their house a long time ago, their assessed value drops down. But you can generally see it's like 550 and it works its way down. Next, Frank. We also looked at the closing costs. A lot of people don't really think about this until they start looking at a house. It costs you some money to sell your house and buy a new one. And we estimated it could be as high as $40,000. If you take a look at for a typical home with a sale price of $500, less than 40, you get about $460,000 left to purchase a new home. And the last one is, now what do you do at 460 in Medfield? What can I purchase? And the question we ask seniors, do you have $500,000 cash under the mattress that you could use to buy a house? Can you cash in a 401 plan, an annuity? Can you get a mortgage from a bank, a bridge loan, a VA loan? Do you want to sell your home and move to an apartment and then wait some to buy a new house? And from my personal experience, getting a mortgage or a bridge loan or a VA loan is next to impossible. Next, Frank. What was the available housing in Medfield? Senior options, if you're looking for something for $500,000 and under, there really isn't anything. North Street, Hospital Road, those projects, the one up Hospital Road is going to start at $800,000 and go up. And Village, Medfield Village, those properties are $1 million. So there really isn't any housing stock that seniors can look forward to in any significant number of units. Frank? What are the choices? Well, the one I'm thinking about is aging in place. Move out of town. A lot of people have moved to Norfolk. Somehow or other, maybe we can advocate for some kind of a Medfield solution. And what I think is going to be important is to maybe use town-owned land for reasonably priced units. One of the things that I wanted to respond to was the survey. We did an online survey using Google Forms. We had developed a questionnaire. We had the questionnaires available at the senior center where they had a computer. We had copies of the form to fill in. It wasn't very lengthy. We had boxes at the library and the town hall with copies of the form that people could take home, fill out, and bring it back. Also, based on the responses that we had, because one of the questions we asked was how many people are in your household? And using the information from that survey, we think we reached about 271 seniors in our survey. And there was some people on the who felt maybe we were too much senior center centric, and there was a group of people down the senior centers, I don't know, some kind of a senior cabal down there that was running this thing. But we did try to get seniors in town, everyone involved. If they wanted to take the survey, they could. And I don't really think we need to do another survey. And I can tell you a story. It kind of reminds me of a kid who goes to his father, says, "Dad, I want an ice cream. Can we go?" "Wait a minute, son. What flavor do you want?" "I want chocolate." "Can we go now, Dad?" "Wait a minute. Do you want a sugar cone or a waffle cone?" Sugar cone." "Can we go now, Dad?" "Well, wait a minute now. Do you want sprinkles on that?" "Dad, I just want to get an ice cream." So, I mean, this is how I think seniors feel. We've got a problem. We've sketched it out. We've fleshed it out. And we really think that we need somebody at Town Hall to help us make this happen. Otherwise, we're going to be aging in place. A lot of people are moving. The real estate taxes have gone up. A lot of people told me they're leaving. They can't handle it. Next one, Frank. Some of the findings, we've gone through this before. Seniors want to stay in Medfield, 70%. 68% have lived in town for over 30 years. These are people who have paid taxes every year, send their kids through, and now they want to at least stay in town. They like the town. They don't want to move out of town. They're looking for, their assessments are between 465 and 560. Seniors 65 and over, most of us have limited incomes. We're living on Social Security. We're living on 401ks. We're living on Roth IRAs. This is what we have. We don't have big incomes coming in, most of us. Some of us do. In the survey, most of them favored a single-level home or an apartment, single family or a condo, and 70% seek home prices between $300 and $450. Next, Frank. What kind of senior housing is planned for Medfield? Frank. I don't know if you can read this, but these are some, and they're probably dated now because I know that the hospital has changed some of their schemes, but this was what it was available in October. This is one of their schemes, and it shows senior living, which to me means assisted living in a nursing home. And when I looked at that, I said, that isn't something I'm looking for right now, thank God. So I wasn't too happy about that. Frank? This was another scheme which also talked about senior living. And this is a code word. It says senior living, but to my way of understanding it, it means assisted living or a nursing home or memory care unit, etc., which is all well and good. We probably need it, even though they're building one over in Millis, just up the road from Medfield, which is probably be built before the time we even get started on the hospital. They're going to have a assisted living facility. Next one, Frank. Now we get down to the two lots that were near the senior center, and which would appear to be obvious places where senior housing ought to be. The Hinckley property, which is an old farmland, which abuts directly to the senior center property, and also Lot 3, says Hinckley there, but that should be Lot 3, which is right in front of the turnaround circle in front of the Kingsbury Club. The town owned those properties. They're about 4 acres that are buildable between the two sites. They're adjacent to the senior center. They have access from Harding and Ice House Road. They have utilities, etc. The state hospital scheme at the time had, on the left, on the Lot 3, they had 55 plus 40B apartments, 42 units, which is good. It's seniors, it's apartments, so if you put in some affordable units of 10 or 15%, the entire number 42 counts for our affordable housing. The Hinckley property was noted as 55 plus senior appropriate housing, 15 to, I don't know, 20 or so, but it's going to be a small amount. And when you think about the need in Medfield, 15 units of housing is really a drop in the bucket. I mean, that's not going to take care of what's going to be happening in Medfield. But it's a start, and I'm never going to see it, but at least I think some of the people coming up might have a chance to move to someplace like that. Frank? What about the park and 40B? Most of the seniors who own a home would not qualify for park. They have too much income and equity. 40B units income limit is $62K for a couple, and your existing home must be worth less than $175K. And I don't know of anybody in town who has a house that's worth $175,000. So really, 40B isn't for seniors. And when I first made this daring step to raise my hand at a town meeting a couple of years ago, I said that what the state needs is a 40S program, because the needs of seniors, particularly in Medfield, are unique. Nobody in Medfield went to the state and said, we want affordable housing. Yet here we are, the seniors of Medfield were coming and said, we need housing. And I know it's a local issue, and you got to play with the rules that the state has. We did have discussions with a builder who was doing projects in Norfolk, and he told us the biggest driver of housing costs is the high price of land in Medfield. And we asked him if the land costs could be reduced or eliminated, could you build houses for under $400,000? And he said he could. So the big bugaboo is the cost of land. If you go to the next one, Frank, I'm not sure I got it on there because I didn't get a handout. The Hospital Road project, and I think the builder had to pay over $1 million for that land up there. He originally was going to put in housing which was going to be tiered. It was going to be $400,000, $500,000, and $600,000. And I thought that was a great idea. We could get a good number of seniors taken care of. What happened, it went along. He decided that wasn't going to work, and he was going to jack up the price. Now they're built a model. They're starting construction. They've been blasting like heck up there. And the opening price is $800,000. So again, this is a venue that is not for Medfield seniors. It's probably very attractive for other people who want to come in here and they want to almost like a small little home. But seniors, no way. Frank? And I wanted to put in a discussion of some of the latest plans under consideration by the Selectmen, because getting to Selectmen's meetings is not easy. I guess you can watch it at home on TV or you can tape it. I know that your website is now trying to have those online and I credit Christine for all the work she's done, but really, there's a lot of things that happen on here that people, a lot of seniors don't like to drive at night. But it would help if those videos, those agendas, those minutes were available to the people who could look at them online at home and find their way around the website easily. And you probably can't read this because I can't, but the 40B, responding to the requirements of 40B, the town has done several studies and had committees. They did a housing production plan, do you remember that? The senior housing study, which is what we did. The state hospital is doing work which affects those two lots, Hinckley and Lot 3. And then the Affordable Housing Trust was put in. And we actually voted $1 million into that trust. So we've got a lot of different tools and also studies about what needs to be done, what people want. Okay, Frank? The senior housing study recommendations was to focus on Lot 3 in Hinckley and remove those lots from the Medfield State Hospital for expediency. We didn't want to see those two lots get sucked up to the hospital project, and I know it's a major undertaking at the hospital, and it needs a lot of conscientious looking at, and it can't move swiftly. But from a senior's point of view, this is an obvious place for senior housing. We didn't see any reason why these couldn't be broken off and something done, so at least we could have seniors see that we're doing some work. Lot 3, we'd like to see the apartments that were recommended by the state hospital, a version of back, 40B, and Hinckley, 65 plus cottage housing. And I'm saying, and I think it should be 40B. And I'm a little bit troubled about the word cottage. I don't think you're going to see in the real estate paper of the Globe advertising for cottages for sale. I think that was a song by Frank Sinatra, but it doesn't, I don't know what it means. It can mean something small, it can mean something without a garage, it can mean something with one bathroom, one bedroom. God only knows, but I don't know what cottage means to the state hospital people or to the town. And I always felt that to offset the prices for the land, that places like the Hinckley and Lot 3 should be put into the Affordable Housing Trust. Now, I know a lot of people say you can't do that, it's not legal, but the way I read the Affordable Housing Trust, they're asking the committees and the towns to be creative, to think about things as a developer would have, that you can accept land, you can accept money. I don't know why you can't accept town land, even if you gave the a 50% value or something like that. If you think about Hospital Road, he paid $1.5 million something for the property. He's putting in 40B housing, and he needs to have the market rate housing start at $800,000. And I know that the selectmen were thinking about doing something on Hinckley, not a 40B project, a market rate housing, and maybe I'm wrong. And the land
You are,
would.
but go ahead.
Yeah, okay, well, that's what we want to hear, and I think you're going to have an eager audience to hear. But I thought that that would be a great place to use the Affordable Housing Trust, that the land could be put in. The other thing is that if you think about the stricture that you got, that the selectmen had, was that the housing on Hinckley would be stipulated to the contractor, that it would have to sell between $350,000 and $500,000, if I'm not mistaken. And if you think about, $350,000 is a low price, and I don't know why you couldn't creatively say that this is affordable housing. I don't know what the limit is for a two-person family in a suburban. What's the price they'd have to pay for a house or a cottage that would be considered affordable? And I don't know. I thought it was like $3 something, maybe $390. No, what is it? 800, 200?
Generally below 250,000.
Below 250. But don't forget, you got to have affordable units. If you only have 15 to start with, how many affordable are you going to have? 3?
It would have to be 4.
4. So 4. So you could change your scheme there and say, okay, those are going to be $295. not gonna be a big deal. And then the other ones will be market.
That's actually a big deal.
It is a big deal, okay.
You can't do that.
Can't do that. Well, Frank, let's go, finish up here. Well, this is more of the same. Let's go to the next one, Frank.
Well, this is lot 3. You want to talk about lot 3?
Well, we can talk about Lot 3.
We love to talk about lot 3 here, Tony. This is-
I'm sure you do, but,
We actually plan to later on, I believe, right, if you want to stay.
well, it's the same thing. I think the apartments were favored. I think what I saw was that the town was gonna put it out for bid, and they were gonna pick either a commercial developer or the apartment. And the apartment would only go if it was 50% better than the sports complex to the town financially. Was that right?
That is correct.
That is correct. So in other words, the housing would have to have a handicapped to compete against the sports complex. And not only that, the sports complex is gonna add a lot of traffic to Ice House Road. And if you're familiar with some of the other towns, you got mothers driving kids to the sports complex, and they're always late. And I don't think it's gonna be a great idea, traffic-wise.
The fathers are late sometimes too, Tony.
The
Just to
fathers
be,
late
just
sometimes, too.
in all fairness.
Right. And that's the Hinckley. It's more or less what I said, that the features of the cottages, the price points. And I look at the Hospital Road and I see what happens up there. And if they can't make something work at 800, I don't know how you're gonna find a developer who will build those houses for that kind of money that you want, 3 to 5, and make a profit. I don't know, maybe you'll get a lot of bidders that say they can do it. So I will stop. I know you're gonna be ready to tell us all the good things you're gonna be able to do for the seniors.
So I think that just because of, it looks like a lot of the discussion's gonna revolve around Hinckley and Lot 3, so I should probably recuse myself from the discussion if that's where it's headed.
I actually think if you want to stay, I think there's some broader questions that we should
Okay.
talk about first, about approaches to senior housing. I think maybe at the tail end, if people want to hear about Lot 3. I'm the one who stood up for Lot 3 as commercial development, so you know who to throw the tomatoes at. But I don't think that's where we necessarily need to start. I actually would prefer that we start with some more general questions about the views you all have on senior housing, in which case I think you could be here. If,
Sure, go ahead then.
That sound reasonable to you, Mike?
Fine by me.
Yes.
I'm just curious about the 50%.
Why don't we hold that off until we get to Lot 3? Well, see, Pete has to recuse himself, so if we're gonna talk about Lot 3, he has to get up and walk away. And I'd rather have a discussion about the broader concepts of, personally, I'd rather talk about senior housing broadly, and then we can get into Lot 3.
So why don't you start on your broader
So,
senior housing?
Tony, I want to actually ask, obviously, you and I talked about this, the draft, I saw the draft report in the summer, and this, as a senior, I guess I, at some point, may have more of a vested interest in this conversation than even I have now. For me personally, I have been thinking about this situation, and I've started to come to some conclusions that are not what has been the conventional thinking. But let me start with a couple of questions. The picture you painted and the discussions we've had about housing have been very heavily pointed in the direction of seniors wanting to buy their property. And one of the questions that I really wonder about, if I look at it, if I were in my 70s and I were selling a house and I was pulling a significant amount of equity out of that house, I wouldn't necessarily want to pour that same equity into a downsized house, even at $500,000, if I had an option of renting something that was reasonable and that was, in fact, maybe even nice, that I could pay rent on and keep my equity in the bank and make money off that and have flexibility. So there's one question I have. I really don't understand the focus on buying versus some number of seniors being interested in renting. You got an answer behind
Why
it there.
don't why don't you go Tony first and then behind you?
Okay.
Tony, can you use the microphone?
Gil has it.
Gil's offering you one.
I can understand your concern about that, but when I had discussions with my wife, and I said, here we are in our 70s, we're going to sell the house, we get a lump sum of money, put it in the bank, maybe we'll get 2% interest, and we'll rent someplace that's probably going to cost us $2,500 minimum to start. It's going to go up over time. And if my wife lives into her 90s, will that money last me? Will it last her? And we kind of figured, well, it isn't going to last. So rather than do that, let's invest in another house, condominium or whatever the heck it is, and we'll pay the condo charges or whatever else like that. And then when we get through with it, my wife then could then sell the house, it'd probably appreciate in value, and she would have something to take to move someplace else or to go into assisted living. So I think that's. We've been so used to having a house and getting along with our budgets, putting out $3,000 a month. That's going to add up, and you can't do anything about it. I realize we won't have the high tax bill, but.
So let's hear the next answer.
Thanks, Tony. Actually, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can.
I think there's a definite appeal to renting. The problem being is, as I understand it, I don't know enough about it, but if one of us, there's the two of us, one of us had to go into a nursing home, they take everything. So most people our age want to own the property because that's protected. So that's a very big, yeah.
There are certainly a number of different ways of trying to protect your assets from Medicaid.
That is the issue generally.
Okay.
Laurel Scotty, 10 Green Street. Rent, it's $2,400 just to rent a 2-bedroom, 800 square foot apartment on North Street. If you're building a small house, it's going to be a lot more than $2,400. I'm a senior, and when I moved here, I bought because I could control that cost. I couldn't control rent, and I didn't want to get into the situation of the constant move and you can guarantee what your income is, except for the taxes here.
Well, yeah,
But-
so that's
but
part of where I'm
that's-
coming from, because if you're renting, the taxes go away, so when you look at the rent, you ought to take away the taxes you're not paying when you actually look at the impact of rent.
But the taxes are a write-off, and it's still less than what the rents are here. Yeah.
Well, so that's only one of my questions. That's helpful. I hadn't really thought about people possibly making a decision based on sheltering. I'm looking more at people locking up their equity when in fact, people take out reverse mortgages to get a hold of that equity. So if you're actually making a transition, it makes a lot of sense to me for, as I think about being in that situation, if I could find a good place to rent. And I don't think, this isn't New York City, so rents aren't going to go through the roof. You probably can pretty much count on a degree of stability there. But having that asset that's earning interest, that was how I was looking at it. So hadn't looked at it the other way. Thanks.
Yeah, Kevin Stoddard, 6 Baker Road. I have a lot of problems with some of the proposals and how it works. The first is the assumption that there's a big demand for smaller homes, single level living. I personally bought a house and sold a house behind mine on Charlesdale. When I bought it, I was the only buyer. It's a ranch, almost 1,000 square feet. Bought it for $325. Rehabbed it inside and out, new siding, new roof, new bathroom, new kitchen. Everything's got a 3-car garage, and sold it for $375 in 2009. Across the street from that, another Charlesdale home sold in September of 14. Also has a garage, single level living. A retired fireman from Dover bought the home for $411,000. This is only 3 years ago. A home on Adams Street, very nice ranch. Friends of ours were trying to sell it for years. sold it in August of 2016 for $470. The couple that bought it was from Sherborne. So there's been a lot of homes, I think, in general, that would fit the needs of seniors downsizing on one level in Medfield that Medfieldians didn't come in and buy. There was a home on Charlesdale, a ranch that a woman rehabbed, looked very beautiful. It went for $650, and somebody from Medfield did downsize into the home. So, one question I have is, it's one thing to do a survey, it's another thing to pull the trigger and actually move out of your older home. If there are no homes for sale for less than $500,000, why should I, as a taxpayer, subsidize the purchase of a senior that wants to buy a home for $350 and have that wealth transfer from the home that they're selling for $650 or $700 go into their pocket? It has no townwide benefit.
So let me try, because this gets to another issue I had, let me try to answer your question in how I've been thinking about this. Maybe it helps. I think the short answer why some of those maybe don't work is that maybe some of the formats on those, even though the price worked, the configuration maybe didn't work, so there is an issue around that. But I've been thinking about two things. Tony showed the projections that show this town is going to get older. And if the state's projecting the same thing, my thinking in this is completely flipped. We've had an attitude of trying to prevent families with children from moving into town. I actually think this town should find ways to free up the family housing that perhaps some seniors are overstaying in order to bring more families into town. Our student population is down. At the point that this becomes a retirement community, the commitment to our schools goes away because almost everybody is senior and they don't have kids in the schools, so who wants to throw all that money at them? If we lose some reasonable balance between younger people and older people, I think that we actually lose our ability to be the vibrant community that we are. So in thinking about why we might try to find senior housing, first off, I think we have seniors who say there's formats and we'd like to find houses that work for us better, and to the extent we can meet needs, I think we ought to. It happens to be, as I'm looking at it now, that might actually help ensure the health of the town by freeing up houses that are more appropriate for families. That's just me speaking.
Thank you. I'd like to echo a lot of what you said, because I think that, thanks, Tony. A lot of what you said is really true. And I appreciate everything the gentleman in front of me had to say as well. But the reason that seniors aren't as attracted to the housing that you were describing is because they still have to mow the lawn, they still have to snowplow the drive. No?
No. You hire landscapers, they're all over town.
Oh, wait a second, excuse me. I speak from experience. I'm 73. I pay to have my lawn taken care of and to have someone plow the drive. So you're right, but these are all expenses that would take worry away from my mind that the condominium association was taking care of these, that I didn't have to worry if the guy wasn't going to show up to do the, excuse me, Tony, I just want to finish, because that's, excuse me, one thing that I just wanted to say is that it is easier to live in a community where, that's like why renting is attractive. You don't worry about the plow, you don't worry about the landscape. The other thing is, it provides community for the senior citizens. They're with people, their peer group to some extent. More important than that is when you said, why should I as a taxpayer put the money in for seniors to have it easier? I understand that question totally too. My husband and I do not have children, and we have been paying taxes for schools for the 36 years we've been married. And I do it with such glee because I want the community to be a good community where I live. And I want to feel that I'm making an impact and doing something for the community. And that the children that grow up here are going to have the best of everything. And that I'm a part of that process. I'm not isolated. I also want to point out what you said earlier about seniors being within a community. Diversity is extremely important in community, particularly today. It's becoming more and more important. Not only is it more important, it's a reality, whether you like it or not. It's the reality. So you want to do everything you can to make more affordable housing for people to come into the city. And what you described is perfect for people to come into Medfield that want to start out and raise their children here. So there are all kinds of sociological reasons as well as economic reasons to be considered when considering something like senior housing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just make one point? One of the things that senior housing, and I hope you remember this when you ever develop senior housing, is that you ought to have specifications that make the house adaptable for seniors. This means like a no-step entry. This means wide corridors so you can get a wheelchair, handicapped bathrooms. There's a whole series of things that you have to be senior appropriate housing. And I think a lot of the housing might be practical, but I mean, do they have all of these features? I don't know. But when you start out from scratch and you're going to build something, I just hope that you have the right kind of complete senior type specifications. And it's becoming more and more prevalent that developers now are using that as a standard for housing so that it can be used by anybody, young family or an older family.
Could I make one comment in defense of Kevin's earlier comment? He used the word subsidize. I don't, from our discussions that we've had here in the Board of Selectmen, the idea that the town will in one way, shape, or form donate real estate or some aspect of real estate that has value so that one group of people can go make the initial purchase below market and then own it and then sell it at market. It says that that entire subsidy goes to the first owner, and then all of a sudden you have high-priced housing. So just to push back on that concept, the idea that there will be some form of free resource that will artificially drop the price of housing, I don't think you should count on that, at least in a sale-type situation. Maybe if there's some way for the town to run something, that then you can control a little bit of that. But as far as actually a true sale of real estate, I think it's unrealistic for you to expect the town to kick something in for the first owners. And so to your use of the word subsidizing, if that means giving money away to one group of people at the expense of the town, I think you're right. We can't, first off, I don't think we can do it legally. Speaking as a selectman, I personally would not endorse that. What I want to do is find a way to define housing which meets a senior need at the price that seniors can afford. And the last point I'm going to make, and then you guys can have a turn. We've tried to keep solving this with 40B/senior housing. And as Tony pointed out, the 40B piece of that, most seniors don't qualify for. A few do, because I think there's a few that moved into Park, so there are some seniors who do. Think about it, if you have a 40B project and the seniors don't, for the most part, qualify for 40B, but the project itself is designed for seniors, in a 40B project, the below market units, where does the price difference come from? It's the price in the non-subsidized units. If we have seniors that don't qualify for 40B who need senior housing, I'm thinking we need to develop senior housing, not 40B, not community. I think, Courtney, you can correct it, but not something that there's one group of people that get a subsidized price at the expense of the rest of the people in the unit, because it's the seniors that don't qualify for the subsidy that need a good price. I think we've been thinking about it the wrong way. We need to think just straight senior housing at whatever, it's got to be at the right price, but we do that across the board.
Why can't the town keep the ownership of the property the way you did it at Turtlebrook?
Well, then I think, Mark.
We don't own Turtlebrook.
No, that's a condominium, no, it's ownership,
It's a private ownership.
private ownership.
Where's the one that was deed restricted?
Allendale, but that was a
Allendale,
private owned too.
We don't own that either, it's privately owned by.
But I don't know why something like that couldn't be done. I mean, to solve this problem, you got to be creative. And either you have to go with the rules that are in place, or you have to get the rules changed at the State House.
Those are both 40B projects that you referred to.
Yeah.
Well, and to your point, Tony, the only thing I could think of is if the town leased the land, but then there would be a lease payment. You don't get it for free, and I don't know if that's even legal. But
Anything the town does to bring the cost down to $350 is gonna be a subsidy.
So the most recent discussions, Kevin, have been to try to increase the density to make it a market rate at the point that people are more interested in. And you do that by squeezing more units onto the same lot, is my understanding. So, and then it becomes just a market.
You're spreading the
Function.
fixed costs, the land acquisition costs among more units.
Right. I mean, so do we want to shift to a more specific discussion of Hinckley now, if that's where we're going? Because it seems like, I mean, Kevin's comments address what we've done with Hinckley. Gus, you brought up what you think we were talking about when we were talking about Hinckley, and so,
So,
that's
before-
fine, but could ask one request?
or we can continue the general discussion and then move on to it, because that's where it's heading now, into the more
I'm
specifics.
I'm okay, but I do have one request, one topic, which is the survey that we want to run, the selectmen have commissioned. I heard you say you don't think we need another survey, Tony. I honestly think we do, because we don't actually know, in this category of whether we have 40B seniors, community housing seniors, seniors who just need to find something they can buy for between $300 to $450, or seniors who need a format and really don't care that much about what it costs. If they could get good stuff, they'd buy it. It's just, they don't want the big house, they want the little house that isn't for sale anymore in Medfield. And where they want that, and whether they want to buy or whether they want to rent, the survey we're talking about is to take the survey that you've done, dig down into a lot more specificity around format, location, pricing, buy versus rent, and specific timeframes to get.
And that's going to be valuable to the town to get that
I think it
information?
absolutely will be.
I disagree.
Well, I understand that, but I've looked at your survey and there's things it doesn't tell us. I can tell you straight out.
Kid asking for the ice cream.
Well, so here's, the idea though is this survey right now we're thinking might take 3 to 4 months. So in terms of,
Don't forget, our study, the only cost we had was printing for $300.
10,000 is the latest number. Yep, that's right.
Tony, could you share your microphone with the?
No.
Oh, you okay?
My question was answered.
All right.
I was going to say, how much is this survey going to cost?
Yep.
The hours didn't cost that much.
This would be a statistically valid survey of all
And
households.
what are we going to do with this survey?
We're gonna use it, we're gonna use it,
Anything else.
we're going to use it to figure out how many units of what type of a format over what type of a time frame is actually needed. With a group, with a higher degree of confidence that the entire senior population's been heard from.
My question is, we've been working on this for a long time, and Tony should run for selectman. He has worked tirelessly. But
I think
We
the
are going
papers are
nowhere.
closed, right?
nowhere. I think I'll be dead for 20 years before we get any senior housing. And are you going to do anything about taxes for seniors?
If you want to do something about taxes for seniors, there's 2 things that can be done. You can provide seniors with the opportunity to move to a lower valued piece of property. There's 3 things. You can have seniors be able to buy lower priced property so that the taxes are lower. You can have seniors choose to move from something they own to something they rent, or you can more broadly diversify the tax base. Or
you can make substantial cuts in town services. That's the
or
fourth
you can
option.
cut everybody's
And
taxes.
Want a big
specific-
tax
No,
cut,
there
you
was-
can go
I
run
was
for
at
school
a
committee.
selectmen's meeting, and they said they were thinking about dropping the seniors' tax rate.
It's
when
a
I
it's a
got my
problem because of the,
taxes
under the
A
Constitution.
couple
it-
Which
weeks
town?
ago.
Which
It's-
town?
It's terrible. They keep going up, 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 up.
Yeah, it's a very expensive town for
Okay.
taxes, it is. It's a problem. I mean, so what you're talking about is, it's a constitutional problem in Massachusetts. The Constitution says that everybody has to be taxed the same. That's why this millionaire's tax is, I don't know if that's a constitutional change or not, but I think it has to be.
Well, that's for the state income tax.
For the state income tax, but the property tax is the same. I know that Sudbury was looking into some sort of system.
There's no statutory authority. That's one of the retained powers of the state. Localities don't have the authority to deal with tax issues.
So we can't have different taxes for
There
different
was,
groups.
there was an attempt, I think it was Sudbury, to get special legislation, a home rule petition just affecting Sudbury, and as far as I know, it's in legal limbo somewhere.
The DOR will authorize an exemption for seniors, but that's as far as is allowed for seniors specifically.
Which we have, yeah.
Yeah, which you have, and the rate at which the exemptions can be set is also set by the state, so the town has very little latitude.
I mean, one of the few things that seniors can do is that seniors can defer some of their real estate taxes. I don't know exactly how much of it you can defer, but then it ultimately has to be paid when the senior dies. And so that it's not a forgiveness, it's just a postponement of the tax, but that's available to people. I mean, I guess my personal view on it, and I'll talk about the general stuff while I can, because I'm gonna have to leave in a second when you get to the specifics, but I regard seniors as an asset to the town. Between the historic knowledge, the involvement in the community, I think that's something that we as a town want to preserve, and we don't want our seniors moving to Norfolk or anywhere else. I think that the way that we try to do that is by building a diversity of housing so that there are a lot of different choices for people. When I was a kid, your choice was you live in your home or you go to the nursing home. Now there's just a range of choices there's assisted living with the cafeteria plans. There's just all kinds of things. I worked with LaSalle College, and we built something while I was working with them, LaSalle Village. I mean, it's a CCRC. You buy in and you have care for your life. My mother decided that she needed something, and so she moved in there when they opened. It worked perfectly for her. She spent her time in her 900 square foot apartment. She paid like $2,600 a month for that. She also got a meal or two a day for that price. When she fell and broke her hip and had to go up to the nursing home, she still paid $2,600 a month. And she basically and you sign a contract there for life care. LaSalle Village will take care of you until you die, for the $2,600 a month. And then when you pay a premium to get into LaSalle Village, because it's like buying a unit. When you die, your estate gets 90% of the price back, so that there is equity. There are different ways of doing that. Carlton Willard out in Bedford is a CCRC, same sort of thing, but you don't get 90% back at the tail end. The buy-in is lower, but you don't get the money back at the back end. I mean, there are just a lot of different ways of doing it. I think what we are looking to try to do is to create as many of those different options as we can. So
LaSalle
why
is
don't you go ahead and then give the microphone
Thank you.
over here.
LaSalle is assisted living, as far as I know.
No, it's independent living, and then they do have some assisted living, and they've got a nursing home.
Excuse me, all right, it's independent living where you get your meals and such as that. What we're talking about is a little bit different. We're talking about true independent living, either through renting or through purchasing a home or a condominium. And with the deepest respect, I've had a lot of experience with places like LaSalle and Traditions and different independent living facilities. They are not comparable to condominiums or apartments for seniors. You will find many more people in places like LaSalle who are in need of care and are not at the same level of independence as someone that's going to rent outside or purchase outside. They are heavily medicated in many instances. I'm not saying this to be difficult. I'm saying it because I've actually experienced it. My mother is in a nursing home. She's 95. She was in Traditions assisted living prior to that. So I have had the experience of going to many, many different assisted livings and nursing homes. So just to be clear on that, there is a difference. As wonderful as it is, it's different.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I think that's what you want, is
No, it isn't
a
what we
number of
want.
different options for people.
Well, that's not the option we're talking about. But what I would like to say is when the gentleman in front of me said we couldn't find something or 350,000, or whatever it is. I agree, we're not going to find a house at that price in Medfield. But if you look at Park, I've not been in it, but it looks lovely from the outside. You know, certainly, I think that's an appropriate model for seniors if there's some parking that's covered from snow. I'm happy to live in an apartment. I think what you said is absolutely true. We need diversity in terms of houses or apartments, but I wouldn't rule out housing in your survey. I hope you do apartment-style surveys. Thank you.
Up here.
What you were referring
Could you just use the microphone? That allows people at home to hear you. We can all hear you in the room here, but not at home, they can't.
I hope everyone can hear me. What you were referring to is called the Continuing Care Retirement Community, and they are very, very attractive and very much in demand. I know personally because my sister and brother-in-law, who live in New Hampshire, have applied to reside in one, and there's quite a long list of people who want to live in facilities like that. And you do start out living in an independent apartment, and then as you need a higher level of care, you would go into assisted living and then nursing home care. But it's in one facility, and they take care of you for the rest of your life.
Yeah. But most of the people that move in there are in their 80s. Most of the people
Yes,
before that don't want
yes,
that, so they want
yes.
their own home.
Right. So,
We have a question in the way back. I'm sorry, did you have a question?
Yes.
Yes, or a comment? Why don't you go first and then in the way back?
Eve Potts. I used to live in Belknap. I had a Garrison Colonial, and I'm in my 80s, and I'm very fortunate to be very healthy. But to look in the future, going up and down in a Colonial was not very practical. Trying to find something that was appropriate for me, I'm also a retired teacher in Medfield, was very difficult, and I finally found one. But most of them, whether it's Park doesn't have an elevator.
We need an elevator, right.
Yeah, we need elevators if you do. But to me, I wanted to be ground floor level. And again, for me, it was not appropriate. But to have what Tony's describing would be very appropriate. One level, and again, it's for active seniors. And you know, but to look into what you're talking about, I have several friends have been in them, where you have the continuing care, you start and go to the different levels. We don't have anything right around here. For me, it was, first of all, I couldn't afford it. It was not, for my income level, it was not that appropriate. So that's why this to be in the one level something, and to use the facilities at the senior center. I mean, I do my exercise there, I can afford it, I do the swimming thanks to the senior center, and I couldn't afford Kingsbury normally, but I can with the senior option. You know, it has everything. So to be close to that is a real plus. So this is another viewpoint, but being that in one level is very, very important, even though I'm very fortunate that I can, you know, but looking to the future, so.
I think one of the things that came out of the survey, well, the mic is going back there, from your survey, Tony, is that there are a significant number of seniors who would like to be close to the senior center and perhaps to Kingsbury. There's an even greater number of seniors who would like to be close to downtown. So part of trying to figure this out is figuring out how do you make the options available to those people who would like to be able to walk downtown versus how many would actually like to be right by the senior center. When the Dale Street School is gone, things get interesting if the Dale Street School moves.
Way in the back.
Let me jump in here. I'm Toby Burrell. I live at 6 Cranmore Road. And before I make my comments, I do want to say thank you to Tony. Tony, I recognize that this was a ton of work. Thank you very much. And at the very least, what you've done here is you've gotten the attention of the Board of Selectmen and certainly the attention of 271 people in the town who realize that this is an issue that needs to be addressed. Having said that, I'm with you, Gus. I think what we need to do at this point is kind of take a step back. Let's broaden that survey. Let's get a hold of as many people in this town who this impacts. I'm 66 years old, so this doesn't impact me tomorrow, but I am an empty nester. And yes, I would like to have some plan downstream to stay in Medfield. I would much rather stay here. So I think at this point, that's a good go-forward strategy. Let's come back with a strategy. Let's find out, do you need to live on one level? Do you need stairs? Do you need an elevator? Do you need to be close to the senior center? And once we have it down to that granular kind of level, then we can come back and take a look at, okay, where would we put something like this? What would it have to look like? I know other towns have done it. I mean, Westwood has got a big 55 and over complex right off of 109. So there are developers who will do this. But I think for purposes of tonight, to say thank you to Tony and say, yeah, the go-forward strategy is to kind of dig a little deeper on this. Thank you.
Can we get into at some point, and you'll probably have to recuse yourself, I think we should get into what we have been doing. I know we've explained this in the past, and if you have watched any of the meetings on YouTube, you can see what we have. I mean, the idea that we haven't done anything on this is not true. I have spent a lot of my time over the last several months on issues trying to respond to the draft Senior Housing Study Committee, as has this board. And so we're going to have to get into some of the specifics at that point, but I think, as on the general topic of this, I would like to move into that, not defensively, but just to let you know what's going on, because apparently the message has not gotten out.
Can we have Jerry make his comment first, and then I actually had a question that I was going to ask Roberta, since we have an expert in the room.
Yeah, Jerry Potts, 7 Kerr Street. I actually wanted to, I'm a segue, Mike. I think the last year, the State Hospital Committee, the Housing Production Plan, the activity on the 40B, and the Affordable Housing Trust, this town in the last year has done more than in the past 15 years to address this. And I think we're in a unique position to actually pull the trigger on some things that are going to make a significant difference in the short term. So while the State Hospital Committee, I know it has been a very difficult process, and I've been fortunate to watch them work as hard as they have. The diversity of housing that is involved in that proposal, including Lot 3, this is where Gus and I will disagree. I think the Lot 3 Hinckley was all set up to be able to put some, 40 rental units near the senior center. And the reason I totally agree with Gus, we need more commercial, but there's 190,000 square feet of commercial availability at the state hospital, 190,000. So if we're going to take care of the seniors quickly in it sounds like diversified housing between Hinckley and Lot 3, I strongly feel this town should do that as quickly as possible. And then the state hospital becomes a little bit easier when you have a lot of space for commercial development. Diversity of housing, I will disagree with Tony a little bit. That plan has changed significantly, so while there's a lot of continuing care on the right-hand side, there's a lot of diversity of housing units, residential units coming up, and apartment units on the left-hand side and condominiums. So the diversity of housing, I think the state hospital, and I know we've got members here, they've done a great job of really agonizing over that balance, but I think they've really done a good job. So I want to actually thank the State Hospital Committee and also the Selectmen in the past year, because I think you've done a really, really good job of accelerating this process. And I think we are not ordering ice cream and sprinkles. I think we got the ball, and there's a cherry on it, and we're about to dig in. So,
thanks, Jerry. So, Roberta, can I just ask you, since you are
Courtney.
I'm like Roberta, but I'm Courtney.
I think, sorry. I thought you were talking about Roberta Lynch. Roberta Lynch is in the back. I thought you were talking about Roberta Lynch.
My bad. So, but I know that you're an expert on all of this stuff, and I'm impressed by your knowledge when I hear you talk about it. And so I'm wondering if you or your firm has ever studied, in general, what the senior population in Massachusetts, the United States, is really looking for these days.
We're actually studying this issue specifically in Medfield, and in response to what is happening in Medfield. I think most of us are aware of the trends nationwide with what's happening in senior housing. We've talked about the CCRCs. If anybody's interested, I don't work for Down East Magazine, but there is a 3-page layout highlighting every retirement community in Maine and all of its individual amenities this month. Quite impressive. It really is a nice spread. I'm looking forward. So yes, we have been working on this. We have been looking specifically at what's going on in Medfield. We are definitely aware of what's in the survey. Our company did work on the first housing production plan and the successive iteration, and so we have been working with you guys for a while, and we have been working very specifically on this particular issue with respect to Hinckley and Lot 3. And so I'm going to kind of hold off on further comment because I'm afraid of recusal needs.
But in general, I mean, for instance, at one of the early hospital planning committee meetings, somebody from the Smart Growth Alliance came and talked to them. His pitch was that you should be planning on building 1,000-square-foot homes because those work for the seniors. Most of the seniors are single, he said, and they also work for millennials, so that you build small homes for
So
the two markets.
demographically, one of the things that we're seeing basically everywhere, particularly New England, is the growth of single-person households, particularly among the senior cohorts. We're expecting that to expand in upcoming years. And the implication of single-person households is that you actually need more housing units, not because your population has grown necessarily, but because with a smaller household size, you still need to house them somewhere. Anecdotally, just as millennials are all being cast as people who want to live in 1,000 square feet or less, we know that this is not true of seniors. Not all of them in any event, just as there's different strokes for different folks, and housing diversity is the key at the end of the day. There is a segment of the population who is interested in a smaller house, whether that is 1,000 feet, 1,800 feet, 2,400 feet, 3,600. Smaller is actually relative in a very subjective term. And so when surveys are given and seniors say, oh, we want smaller housing, nobody ever asks the follow-up question as to what does small mean to you? Small means different things. It is a subjective term. And so yes, we are hearing that there is a desire for smaller units in Medfield. However, since we do go to a number of meetings, there's comments regarding Dale Street about the size of those units being inappropriate for seniors because they're too small. I think that's one way of saying that, we are hearing locally that 1,800 might not be the magic number for Medfield. I think your local tastes, nationwide, we hear what the trend is, which is smaller units, less maintenance upkeep. We want single floor living, elevators if you need them, attached garages, so on and so forth. It is what you think. The room, what you think is, what is being listed as a trend is generally what it is. In Medfield, though, I think the taste is slightly more
But
specific.
what you just listed there sounds like an apartment building or a condo building rather than a single-family home.
It depends. I mean,
But it's individual, I guess.
There's individual taste. I don't think that there is. It depends. There's an urbanizing group of seniors who are empty nesters who say, yeah, we want the apartment, we want to live downtown, we want to be able to walk to restaurants and go to the post office and that sort of thing. And that's a specific place. Medfield isn't necessarily set up for that, though, so your seniors are generally going, just because of the spatial organization of the town, your seniors are going to be more likely to be the ones that want single-family duplexes or smaller apartment buildings.
I'm not sure that's necessarily true. From having come to meetings and watching faces, I don't think that's true necessarily. I think it's true of some.
I think the difficulty
Tony
is
had
size.
two floor plans. Your two floor plans at the back of your study. One is 1,500 square feet or 1,543. The other one's 1,743. So I don't even think a 2,400.
We hear mixed things at various meetings, I would say. So the feedback is not always uniform. I think again, this is an issue where different people are going to want different things. And there are some people who, I think in general, I have never heard a meeting in Medfield where somebody has said, I really want a very large apartment building. And so I think that we're thinking that the general taste is still going to be smaller scale, not 90 units like the park, but maybe 42 has been floated for Lot 3. That may be appropriate periodically. But I don't hear a desire for super big projects, and so there's financial ramifications that come with that.
Okay, so do you guys want to then talk about?
Chris has a comment in the back. We get the microphone back to her.
I have it in my hand.
Actually, I had spent some time talking with Roberta, I don't know, about a year and a half ago, and one of the, and Roberta, please, if you can provide the statistics on the number of seniors who have departed Medfield to move to Norfolk, what that number is and where they've moved, because when we're talking about pulling the trigger on actually putting your money down and moving to some place that meets your needs, I was very surprised at that number, but I don't remember it off the top of my head.
Well, I did that presentation in 2012 or 13, and at the time there were 70 families that had moved over to Norfolk, and I didn't actually research Walpole, Franklin, or Millis, so, but that's a few years ago.
And what were the units? Is that River?
River's Edge, and they had the townhouses, Margot Way, and then they had the townhouses in the center of town near the commuter rail.
Well, it was interesting to know where people actually live.
Okay, I'll step aside
All right.
and you guys can discuss.
Is there any way we could get the slide back up there? Is it possible to put the slides back up? Particularly the fourth to last slide that says senior housing study recommendations? If you can't, that's fine. I want to speak to the recommendations and what we've been doing on each of them.
Where do you want to stop?
Senior housing study recommendations. Right there, perfect. And if you could just turn that light over. All right, Sarah, would you mind just turning the light off right by there? So if we look at the recommendations from the Senior Housing Study Committee, and if I could just have everyone's attention for a moment, if you look at the recommendations that were made, if you start at bullet number 1, immediate focus on Lot 3 in Hinckley. So any regular attendees or YouTube viewers of these meetings know that we have been focused on these two pieces of property since the summer. On the second bullet point, removing lots from MSH for expediency, we first had a discussion of this issue last June. We had several meetings devoted to this issue. Steve Nolan from the Medfield State Hospital Master Planning Committee, on behalf of that committee, sent us a memo explaining why he believed that development on Lot 3 would happen more and Hinckley would happen more rapidly if the planning process remained with the MSH MPC. And in response to that memo, and he detailed why he thought that would be the faster approach, and that he actually thought, and based on the work they had done, if we were to remove it as of June of 2017, we would be slowing down the process. So we told him at the time that we would stick with that through the end of the year, and that if the MSH MPC was not in a position to go forward with its master plan and relating zoning changes before this year's annual town meeting, we would in fact remove oversight, and they don't really have any formal jurisdiction over it, but remove any planning responsibilities for Lot 3 and Hinckley from that committee and return them to the Board of Selectmen to move ahead. And we had a discussion about this last week. It's on our agenda for tonight. I suspect we will have a formal vote to do just that. With respect to the third bullet, follow through with MSH study recommendations. Lot 3, 65 plus senior apartments. Gus and I have engaged in at least 10 hours of discussion on Lot 3 over the course of the fall. We had a disagreement at the outset. One of us favored just going ahead with the recommendation of the MSH MPC for the senior apartments. The other of us wanted it to be developed for commercial property. In what I think is a Henry Clay-like compromise, we have decided to let the market decide which is the better use. And in deference to the fact that when the town originally purchased this property in 1995, it was to promote commercial development, that we agreed that the way we would structure the RFP, because this is what one of us would agree to, and the other one was willing to go along with it, would have the senior apartments be the choice if it was 50% more favorable financially to the town, taking into account net tax revenue, lease revenue, purchase revenue, and the rest of it. And so, yes, it would have to be more financially favorable than the sports complex, but we can get to that in a minute. So that's
Mike, I think you need to let me explain my position on that.
I do, but can I just run through?
Okay,
can I
sure.
just let us congratulate ourselves for a while, and then you can explain your position, and I'll just duck over
Very
here.
good. Very good.
With respect to the Hinckley property, okay, and I will say, Tony, that your objection to the word cottage threw me for a loop. I think I didn't realize cottage was an objectionable term.
Look it up in the dictionary.
I've always had a favorable impression of cottages. But, well, who doesn't like going to the Cape? But with respect to what we have been trying to do, and what I have heard from the Senior Housing Study Committee, and what we have heard from the Senior Housing Study Committee, is two things. Number one, that seniors are looking for housing with appropriate senior amenities, garages, no-step entries, handicapped accessible, one-floor living, and the like, that they can purchase in Medfield for, I thought the range was between $350 and $500. Or $300 and $450, right? That's sort of that's for a segment of the senior population, right? And given we're only talking about 16 to 20 units, it's only a segment, that's sort of the sweet spot. And so what we've also heard, which is also in your presentation, and we don't have to scroll back there, which is that 40B won't work for this segment of the senior population because they can't meet either the income limits or the capital asset limits because of the value of their homes. And so what I have spent a lot of time doing, and what Courtney has spent a lot of time doing, and what Sarah has spent a lot of time doing, and what Christine has spent a lot of time doing, is trying to thread the needle of various state statutory and regulatory requirements to make that possible. And we spent a lot of time trying to see, could we do it as a 40B project? Could we do it as a 40B project, but modify the market rate portion of the 40B project such that while for the affordable units, the 4 affordable units, you'd still have to meet the 40B income requirements set by the state, the market rate would be a lower market rate. Okay, that would be accessible to that segment of the senior population. We worked on that for a long time. We worked on a number of different options, and Courtney has spent a lot of time on this, and we did send you the memo that you drafted, correct? Which was sort of the fruit of that. And where we came out was we couldn't thread the needle that way. And that the way we're going to have to do it, if we're going to put something in, and my goal through all of this, okay, has been to come up with something that we can put before town meeting that would achieve the goals that you've set out. And we don't need a further study for this piece of it. So I don't, if you read further study to mean delay on this part of it, I don't think that's true. I think it will inform things we're going to do in the future. But to put something before town meeting, and so Kevin and people who think that Kevin can raise their points about this, you can raise your points about this, and we can have a substantive debate about this project over an article that will be legal, that will be effective, that if the town votes yes on it, it can actually happen. Because my concern is, given the overlay of federal fair housing laws, state constitutional requirements, state regulatory regimes, the opportunity for this to get tripped up because an abutter doesn't like the project and sues, which happens sometimes with projects. Abutters don't like the project and sues. Or for any other reason. Or a developer looks at it and says, wow, there's all sorts of problems with this sale. I don't think this is going to hold up. I think this is going to be challengeable. I can't get clear title and I'm not going to buy it. And so we have landed on a process that Courtney laid out in the memo that I think, or we are hopeful, will get us to a proposal that will, with respect to this property, enable us to put forward that kind of a project. Okay, and Courtney laid out the steps in the memo, and we can talk about it in more detail. But it's basically a 3 to 6 month process of what we have to do to subdivide the land, to put together a senior housing overlay district, and to work out the rest of the details. And so that if it gets to that point, we could possibly do that at a special town meeting in the fall to address precisely the Hinckley property. With respect to the 4th bullet, to offset the high price of land, to put it in Lot 3 in the Affordable Housing Trust, I think we've talked about that. It doesn't solve the problem. That if it goes into the Affordable Housing Trust, it's got to be affordable housing with a capital A and a capital H, which is the way the state defines it. And so the state may well not allow the Affordable Housing Trust to develop that kind of a project. If all you want is a 40B project there, a genuine LIP project that you've told us, based on your survey, seniors in Medfield won't qualify for, that we could do easily. All right? And so if the concern is not for Medfield seniors who don't qualify for 40B projects, we can do a 40B project there. But I have understood, based on your draft report, based on the analysis, the feedback, that the real part of the population that is squeezed here are the ones who are too rich for 40B, but not rich enough to afford to stay here in their current houses. And so that's what we've been trying to do on Hinckley, to see if we could make it work. It's a small enough project, and to put it before the annual town meeting to see if the town of Medfield's legislative body will go ahead with it. So that's what we've done. I think under 5, I think we've been thinking creatively, maybe not creatively enough, but I think on these recommendations, I mean, yes, you can't buy a house tomorrow based on anything we've done, or you're not going to buy a house 6 months from what we've done. But I think we have made a substantial amount of progress. And while there are no participation trophies in town government, we are trying to move the ball on this. And so I don't think it is true that we've simply ignored the recommendations. I don't think it's true that we're looking to put more burdens upon you by asking for additional surveys. I think we have tried to move this along, which is very hard because, to your point, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is not particularly concerned about that segment of the population. So with that, I'm done.
Thank you.
And Gus, you want to go on and explain?
So, yeah, so two points. First, if you heard the intensity or the commitment in Mike's voice about our interest in moving ahead with some senior housing here, I hope you heard it. I absolutely agree with that. For the record, particularly with the Hinckley property, that what we are trying to do with that property is, I think, consistent with what the State Hospital Master Planning Committee has recommended be done with that property. And the only thing that I've already talked about, my own personal perspective on this, is to realize that in some ways pursuing 40B as the type of project actually complicates the ability to be able to produce senior housing that is not 40B, that's at a price that's going to be attractive for, I think, the people that we're trying. We're probably not worried about the seniors who can afford another $800,000 house because they have a $5 million, asset base. That's, if we can help them find, but that's not who we're thinking about. We're thinking about the people that it really matters what they can buy. Let me talk about Lot 3, just to explain my position and not to turn this into an hour-long debate. As Mike already mentioned, Lot 3, along with the other 3 properties on Ice House Road, was bought in 1995. It was represented to the taxpayers at the time, many of whom are perhaps here in this room, that it was going to be bought to provide an inventory of commercially developable land so that Medfield could begin to diversify its tax base and increase its commercial property. Now, over that time, the center has been built there, so that piece was diverted. The Kingsbury Club was built there, so that piece was used as intended, and lot number 3 has sat there dormant for now 23 years. In listening to everybody in town saying taxes are too high, one of the things that's driven my thinking is a desire to diversify the tax base. If you want to knock the tax base down, the only way we're really going to drive the tax base down is either build really, really expensive high-end homes that the one family that lives there pays an obscene amount of taxes on, or you diversify the tax base and build more commercial property. For whatever it's worth, in this town, anytime commercial property comes up, people say we are one bridge too far from anything that would be of any commercial interest to anybody, despite the fact that every town around us has commercial base. So I'm coming with a bias to want to find ways to not sacrifice or lose what little commercially developable property we have. In 2014, at the annual town meeting, a citizen petition was put forward and was passed. It was sponsored by people here in town who basically wanted an athletic facility for their kids so they didn't have to rely on Four Kicks, or there's another one in Northborough or somewhere. There's 2 around here. And they basically got an article passed that authorized the selectmen to lease that property, and let's be clear here, not only for a commercial Four Kicks facility. It was in the best interest of the town. So just so you know, that article that was passed was sponsored by people who wanted a Four Kicks-like facility. The wording of that article does not specify it has to be that. However, my view is when the taxpayers make a vote and they pass an article, I don't think a year later a committee can come and just say, we've decided we're going to ignore what you said and we're going to do something different. So there's a piece of me that's coming from the standpoint that says that was an article sponsored by people who had a particular purpose, and that purpose, I believe, is still there, that interest is still there, and that commercial opportunity is still there, and that's why I'm standing up for it.
Gus is a believer in legislative history.
I would like some accountability and some degree of reliability and integrity in our political system. Yes, I would, and this is where I would like to see us start. So I want you to understand why I'm coming from where I'm coming from. It happens to influence me a little bit, is that when the Kingsbury Club moved in to the lot on Ice House Road, virtually every other athletic facility around here said they wouldn't touch it because it wouldn't make any sense. So we have a commercially successful health club on Ice House Road. They have an interest either in seeing that piece of property expanded, or they're willing to do it themselves. And there's a piece of me that says we ought to help the businesses in our town that are successful. If we can help them be more successful, that's a good thing. And that's also where I'm coming from. Now, there were a few places I would have backed off. One of the things that a concern on the flip side, why not housing? Let me give you some reasons in my thinking, and then you can push back if you want. The Senior Housing Study Committee, their main findings, the least favored format for housing, based on that study, for seniors is apartments. So absorb that for a minute. So we want to put apartments on Ice House Road, and that's the thing that seniors, at least according to the study, least want. The second piece of that originally was it was going to be 40B, and I have great concern that we will not develop the campus. That basically what we'll do is find ways to go to undeveloped land all around town, put in 40B all over the place, and then suddenly 5 or 6 years from now, perhaps the senior housing will be addressed, but the 40B will be addressed, and we'll look at each other and say, gee, I don't think we really need the campus for anything anymore. And I would really like to see this town work hard to get some projects started up at the State Hospital campus so we actually develop it. When Mike and I talked before, I told him that if this was an issue of our being able to maintain our safe harbor, I would back off that lot number 3 position. Mike and I have kind of come to, neither one of us want to go into the town meeting with the only 2 selectmen who get to deal with this, because Pete had to recuse himself on this one particular issue. Neither one of us want to go into town meeting in disagreement with each other and then let you try to figure out what to do. So
we don't have to go to town meeting on this one.
Well, wherever we go where this comes up, I mean,
Right.
what I'm getting at is
This is
this is an issue that it's either me and Mike sitting there butting heads, or it's me and Mike working to figure out a way out. The discussion that we had and that 50% that nobody understands why, that was a result of a negotiation between Mike and me. That 50% for me is the premium that this alternative use would have to be for us to be able to tell the taxpayers who said that they wanted a commercial facility there that they were wrong, we had a better idea, and we're not going to do what they voted on for us to do. That's me. I own it.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
The commercial sports unit, I'm just not quite, I have to admit, I didn't know that it was commercial. I thought it was town-sponsored, that we were going to build it.
The Parks and Rec wants to put up a facility too, but that's a different issue.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Well, I'm just wondering, what is it, the sports unit that's?
It's an indoor, so the Four Kicks facility that's out in Franklin is an indoor, like soccer field, lacrosse field, so that if you have kids who play on sports teams that want to practice those kinds of field sports in inclement weather or late at night, it's an indoor facility to be able to do that.
So somebody would buy the land, build the facility, and pay us a lot of money?
It probably won't be as big a facility as Four Kicks because the lot won't support it. But basically, right now, the Kingsbury Club leases the land from us, pays real estate taxes, pays various fees for their, liquor license and things like that. It would be similar, but it wouldn't be, I don't expect that it would be as much as Kingsbury.
So, and they would pay taxes?
And they would
obviously.
pay taxes.
And so your figures show you that the taxes you would get from this facility are greater than the taxes you would get from the number of seniors owning.
Well,
No.
boy, you're asking sophisticated questions. So this is the drill that we're going to have to go through to figure out what that net impact is. My argument all along has been that would be great if we only had one lot to develop on. That would be the way to do it. That is the way we're going to do it. But when you have the option of putting a commercial facility on one lot and put the housing somewhere else, you can do both.
Okay,
So-
and it also, just out of curiosity, do we know how long the sports facility will be viable? Has been studies done on that, on how long this will be an interest that people will want to have?
Four Kicks has been here for 25 years and is going strong, so I
Well,
think
I'm
it'll be here for a
I'm
long
just
time.
putting it out there because I understand that, my coming up, kids play in the neighborhood and such as that. Now, parents are driving their kids to all kinds of facilities. I don't know what's coming next. I expect when you do your studies that you know that, so I asked the question. The next thing would be when you spoke about 40B, and we spoke about Norfolk having condominiums. I know that on Meeting House Road, every other unit is 40B. So I don't know if you knew that or not. And I don't know if it's the whole complex, but I know that a part of Meeting House Road, every other unit is 40B. And I bring it up because I hear you say that everybody would like a house. And I think that's typical of Medfield because it's a small town that grew and doesn't have a lot of apartments. I grew up in the city. I like apartments. I look at Sherburne. They have apartments right next to a farm. If you go into Sherburne, I'm not sure what road you call it. Well, anyway, it has an ice cream stand and it has a farm. And it's just past,
Sunset Dairy.
what is it?
Sunrise, Sunset, yeah.
I think we take, I think we take your point that there are in fact needs for
Well, but
probably
just more
condominiums.
than that, I
and
want to say, I think that the assessment of property in Sherburne is probably greater than it is in Medfield. And they have found a way, put up apartments there that are condominiums that are very attractive to people. And I think that, I just think it should be thrown out there more, that it's an opportunity. I know Needham is another town where property is assessed much more highly than it is here. They have Highland Ave, which is a 55 community for rental apartments that are lovely. And whatever we do, we have to have, I think, covered parking and elevators are a priority. I think,
Yeah, if I could make just one point about this, though, and I think one thing we have to keep in perspective in all of these discussions is the limits to what we can do as a town government. All right, according to the Senior Housing Study Committee survey, in 2030 there'll be 2,800 seniors in Medfield.
2,800?
Probably spread across, I don't know, how many households do you think would that be? 1,600? I mean, how many, one person, two person households? That's a lot of households, okay? We're not going to be able to promote, endorse, support, or have anything to do with building housing for every senior in Medfield. And so while the surveys are going to be helpful and where we should target it, our ability to address this is relatively modest. And so I think as we talk about these projects, we know what the housing stock is in Medfield. We know what we have. We know what we don't have. We know from our housing production plan where we need to diversify, which the housing production plan points out we need to diversify into more senior housing. And so we shouldn't get overly bogged down in specific details as we work through projects. I guarantee you that for every single project we work on, a lot of seniors will look at it and say, I don't like that. And the best we can do is try to make progress on enough projects that will diversify it, and that's what we can do.
I just absolutely agree with you. I couldn't agree more, but I don't think we should worry about getting bogged down. I think we want to make the best decisions we possibly can make. And I would like to know more about the town government, since you said that's a detriment for the building of senior housing.
Oh, it's not a detriment. I'm just saying there's a limit to what we can do. We can't build 1,600 houses.
I'm not qualified to discuss that with you, so I would like to find out
I'm not
more about
really
it.
either, but I'm just saying, I know we can't build 1,600 houses.
It's the kind of detail we should know. It's something we should know for this conversation. Another thing is, when we talk about 40B, it's not all Medfield people. If we build senior housing, maybe people from Millis will be coming here instead of people from Medfield going to Millis. So it's not like you do the appropriate housing, we're going to find that's going to be taken care of. Courtney, that's a Courtney?
Yes.
I don't know what your position is or who you work for, but I want to
She
say.
works for us. She works for the Community Opportunities Group, who's the consultant we've retained to help us on housing issues.
Oh, great, okay. Because I think that what I would like to know is that what I hear is that builders don't want to build one stories and such as that. I would like to see us be a little more proactive about what we have to offer as a town and as a community of elders to get rid of this concept that elders need 2 bedrooms upstairs. So I bring that to your attention, and I'd be happy to work on it.
Jerry.
Jerry in the back there.
Still Jerry. So again, I totally respect, Gus, what the town voted on a few years ago, but we have a lot more dots to connect today. There are a lot more things that are coming online that we're dealing with, the 40B issue. And I just view with the state hospital having the potential, even the consultant for the state hospital said that isn't particularly valuable commercial property where you've got, again, maybe 190,000 square feet at the state hospital. It seems like we can do both, that we can take care of the senior, if there are 60 units here, 55 units that are all near the senior center that also give them access to the Kingsbury Club, and we can do that fairly rapidly. even if it's a push financially, I think the town should have the option to say, I mean, you've said a 50% premium needs to be done for that. It comes down to valuing our seniors staying here versus potentially losing them to other towns for maybe a financial benefit. And again, if there was no other commercial property, I would totally agree with you.
Jerry, I'll make you an offer. If you can get the other, as a selectman, we have a bunch of factions, groups of people whose needs we have to satisfy. If you can get the people who are advocating for that facility to come and tell me that I'm barking up the wrong tree on their behalf, I'll gladly back off.
No, and I know there are factions for that, but given the needs of the town, we have 90 acres of open space, proposal potentially for a for-profit or some other facility for recreation up there that's actually has better vistas connected to the fields. The idea of taking Lot 3, which is right next to the senior center, it just seems like, I agree commercial space is needed, but we got lots of it in other potential places. And
everybody talks about lots and potential places, and nobody's come up with a firm spot. So, I hear you. And if anybody's wondering, I'm the one that did it. And I'll own it.
Just to that, I mean, I don't want to reopen this particular discussion.
Because it's coming up later in our agenda.
I can't, just to respond to it briefly, I mean, I think this was my quip about legislative history. I mean, just like with the decision to buy the state hospital property, right? You can ask 10 different people, why did we buy the state hospital property, and get 10 different answers. Well, we bought it because of 40B, we bought it for senior housing, we bought it for open space, we bought it for recreation, the town voted unanimously to buy the property. They didn't vote unanimously on why. And I think the same is true with respect to the article, right? And Gus was the warrant committee chairman at the time, and Gus clearly pointed out to the town meeting that voting on that article was not voting on an article for a sports complex, right? Now, again, I don't believe in legislative history, so that's also legislative history. But, I mean, town meeting was forewarned, and I don't know that, I mean, how many people were at that town meeting? 500? I mean, for the citizen petition, you need 10. So if 10 people put a citizen petition for a sports complex, and a majority of 500 people at the town meeting, it was a relatively, the year before it was mixed. The year before was like 58%. That year it passed clearly in favor of the commercial use of it. I can't read the minds of those folks and think they all wanted a sports complex. I think, frankly, and one of the reasons why I was okay with the 50% premium is I think the 50% premium will be readily met. Because in addition to commercial property, the other thing that reduces the tax burden is residential properties that do not require the addition of town services, right? I mean, we talk about averages, per pupil spending for students, per resident cost of town services, but it's not like everybody who moves here comes with an additional price tag, right? Some of them come with a really big price tag if they put you over a break point where you got to hire new police officers, new teachers, or build new buildings. Some of them come with none, right? And so I think in general, my view is that the state hospital consultant estimated that the 42-unit property will generate about $308,000 in taxes and about $108,000 in town services. Now that's estimating simply a per unit cost of town services. No one has explained to me that we're going to have to get a new fire truck, hire a new fireman, a new police officer, a new anything if we build this complex. So for those of you who think the 50% is a big handicap, I agree it is. I also, and that doesn't even count what they're going to pay for the land. Just on the net tax revenue alone, even if the sports complex equaled the Kingsbury Club in revenue for the town, if the consultant is right about this senior housing development, the senior housing development will clearly pass the 50%. And then you add in the lease or purchase revenue, it will cover it clearly. All right. So while it is a handicap, it is one that I expect that if we get a bidder for it, right, if a developer wants to do it, we likely will have that number will look better than this smaller sports complex. So while it's definitely a handicap, and if it's even Steven, because there's always some uncertainty about whatever costs of services come with residential properties, that's another justification for deferring in favor of the commercial property, because that's a little bit more certain, right? It's what kind of services are going to come with it. So that's just my own view of how it's likely to shake out based on the numbers that we have. So it's a handicap, but not a huge one. And
so as they say, let the games begin.
That's Friday night.
Roberta.
Just a quick thing before I have to go home. I just want to say that it's a very small street, Ice House Road, very small. It's also the helicopter pad right out there. And the center has a great relationship with the Kingsbury Club. We do a lot of collaboration there. And actually, Mr. Janjigian brought me over to show me his plans for an addition and expansion, you know, and so it's going to generate more cars. There are a lot of cars that go up and down that street often. And seniors coming out of our building need to make a left-hand turn, and as you get older, left-hand turns are more challenging to make, just an FYI. People do go up and down that street quite fast heading towards the Kingsbury Club, so with their addition, I'm sure there'll be more traffic going into the Kingsbury Club. Then you add the sports complex on top of that, it's going to be very difficult, and we did have a discussion in the past about, you know, putting a different entrance and exit to the senior center, especially for voting days, which is horrible. So back a few years ago, when Mr. Borelli made his pitch for the sports complex, I actually did write a letter which was read at town meeting, and I sent it off to the Park and Recs, that the amount of traffic that would be generated on that little Ice House Road is probably going to be problematic for the people that come to the center. Now, we're over 100 people a day on most days coming in and out of that center, so it's a very busy little street. So I, of course, am not in favor of the sports complex for safety reasons, number one, and of course, I'm a proponent for senior housing. And now I have to go home. And I'm dropping them.
I think we should take 2 more comments on this and then move on, because I see Christian has been sitting here patiently, enjoying the discussion, but would probably like to get on to his 7:45 appointment, which is extraordinarily optimistic, Christine.
We're actually talking this much about Hinckley right now.
Yeah, we've
Can
actually
I
made
just make
time
a
up
couple of
later.
points? Because
We'll go to
I
Tony.
want to leave anyway. The 40B issue, I mean, we really don't like 40Bs because we don't qualify. But if you have a project like Hinckley, we have 15 units and you're going to have 5 40B. The other 10 units are going to be market rates, and you guys are going to try to keep the price under 500, which is a great idea.
They won't be sale units, they'll be rentals.
No, that's what we tried to do, and we couldn't make it work.
Couldn't make it work.
That's why we
So they're
couldn't
going
do
to be
it.
rentals.
No, they're not going to be.
Ownership, but,
Oh, they are ownership? No, oh, I thought you were talking, I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about lot 3.
Oh, Hinckley.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Okay, so at least
Those are sales, those are sales, yes.
40B might be bad in my mind, but at least we'll get 10 units of what I would call affordable, and if you design it right, appropriate housing for seniors. So that's a plus for me. As far as the apartments, I like apartments at 40B because we get 42 units for our affordable housing. So those are apartments are great things to do. I'm sure at the Legion site, you're going to want to put in apartments because you're going to get that number up. God help us when the census comes out in 2020, if our population goes up, so does our number. We're never going to hit 10%.
That was taken into account and the numbers were working.
On the difference between the Fort Kick, the sports complex, we did go through this exercise once before with that piece of property. And Borelli came in and he had a sweetheart deal with the Kingsbury Club. Now, I assume that's not going to happen this time.
No, it is.
Oh, it is going to happen this time. Isn't that swell?
Yeah.
Well,
That's why that's how it makes sense. The total lot 3 square acreage has been reduced so much by environmental buffers that it's hardly a commercial lot with just that.
so you're going to allow him to do that?
Why wouldn't we?
You're going to allow him to do that, and then you're going to hit the
Why wouldn't
apartments with a 50% surcharge. I mean, how
Why wouldn't we?
Not a surcharge.
It's
just
the
the
best
measure for winning
commercial,
the
it's the
I know,
best
but I
commercial
mean-
use of the land.
All right, can we get to Bill and then we can move on?
Wait a minute,
Oh,
one other
sorry.
thing. Can you guys define what cottage means?
Can we just not call them cottages?
Fine.
Can we
Don't
call
ever
them?
use it again unless you
Can we,
define it.
can we call them homes that Tony Santori would like? Can we define it that
And
way?
you're going to find out that on Hinckley, they're going to jam units in, they're going to be like row houses. That's how
mean,
the developer's going to make it work.
Again, here's the thing, Tony. When we put together the senior housing overlay district, okay, we were going to take into account the senior housing study committee. We are, as I said, all the work that's been done has been trying to meet exactly what you say your survey says that segment of the senior population wants, and trying to do so in a way that is legal. We can't do it under 40B. It won't work as a 40B. If it would work as a 40B, we'd be doing it already. We'd have a warrant article on this year's town meeting to do it. It will not happen. That's why we have to go through the process that we've outlined to reach what I thought was your end goal. That's where, and if you don't like the name cottages, call them senior appropriate houses that are smaller than houses that are larger and less appropriate.
Just call it a shire.
Now Bill Massaro, and then we can let Pete come back and sit down and finish the last 3 hours of our meeting.
And then we can really, we can really get into the discussion.
We can get to the meat of our agenda, right, exactly.
I've raised this question before, and I'm going to raise it again, and it has to do with both the Hinckley property and Ice House Road lot number 3. One of the problems you have on Hinckley is you have 16 units, and you, by your zoning law, you're going to require at least, what, 3 affordables, I believe, according to the... Four.
It is 16.
But so you have zoning plans you can play with subdivisions or anything else. But I'll say the seniors are looking for one. By the way, I'm a senior. If you haven't noticed, at Medfield 46 years now. If you want to get the pricing of those 16 units down and give the developer a chance to make some money and get them closer to the goals that you have for the homes there, I see the apartments as a way for him to make up for the potential reductions in price that he might want to give the town for the 16 single units. So you're giving the developer, if you package those two properties together, you're giving the developer the chance to make up for, in the 43 units, market rate units, 40 I guess will be 30-something, whatever the number is, but it'll be a substantial number of market rate units to help him make up not only the difference in the affordables he has to offer in the rentals, but possibly to make up the difference in the affordables that he has to offer in the bungalows or the cottages.
Right. The problem, we can't do it that way though, Bill.
Well,
we have to make the affordables have to mirror the market rate. So if you're doing, you can't do 16 market rate for sales blended with rentals.
Well, I'm not saying blend them. I'm talking about it's the bottom line. You know, all that money goes in from both of those projects, Project A and Project B, or if you split it into two, A1 and A2 and B, they all go to a stockholder or a corporation or whatever. It's the same. If it's one person making the bid, then he essentially winds up with a loss leader perhaps in one instance, and it makes it up on the other items. And the only arguments I've heard against doing that so far are we need to get through the zoning approval processes, we need to go through the planning boards, we need to get town vote on the rezoning, and therefore and then we need to go to DHCD to get approvals and everything else. And I don't know how much going out as a package deal in your bid, you're essentially would go out for 3 bids. You'd go out for a bid just for the Lot 3 as a commercial property, and you'd go out for basically 2 bids, one that says, give me a price for Lot 3 as standalone, perhaps apartment rentals, and then give me a price for Hinckley as a standalone property, and then give me a third price for the 2 of them together. If you want to get creative in a way to make it less unpalatable for the developer to give you closer to what you're looking for. I just, I don't understand. I'd like to think I'm capable of absorbing information. I'd like to think I'm capable of changing my mind over issues and everything else. But I still don't see why you passed up the opportunity for essentially economies of scale for a developer. For 2 housing projects, especially since you're likely to wind up building those same 2 things there in the first place when you're done with all of this process. So you wind up with 16 units over on the bungalows, and you wind up with 43 apartments, and each one of them then has to stand on its own with no opportunity for a developer to have ameliorated some of his costs. So, I guess I talked about this so long, I'm like the rest of us. I can't talk intelligibly or calmly or rationally about the issue. I will point out that the Ice House Road number 3, that the impact that will make on our tax base towards getting towards a diversified tax base or a dual tax base is nil. You need a lot more property than that to ever affect our tax base. So,
Yeah, it's a first, I agree, it's only a first small step.
I think the issue with doing it that way, I mean, first of all, you'd still have to do the rezoning of Hinckley.
that's fine.
You'd still have to do the
You gotta
rezoning
do
of
it anyway,
Hinckley.
right?
Well, you do, and so you'd be rezoning Hinckley and kind of leaving Lot 3B for now. And I don't know, Courtney. I mean, how could we? We've thought about this, and it's.
So there's been a lot of discussion, particularly with the State Hospital Committee, about how to deal with Lot 3 and Lot 1 and the potential for packaging them together. And I know that when we sat down and talked about it, when we as in COG and the town's other consultant, Kathy McCabe, and what that was in December, and kind of the concept that was floating at the time is the 42-unit rental building and the 16 to 20 units on Hinckley. Kathy, and then combined with a Mass Works grant to do the improvements to Ice House Road and package it together. Kathy's perspective was that, at that time, was that the Lot 1 and Lot 3 would need to be done by different developers, but I'm not 100% clear as to what her rationale was, and I'm going to save that for her to respond to because it's not, I'm not going to put words in her mouth. So there, it's my understanding that that is a scenario that is under consideration. I am not 100% sure why Kathy does not think the sites can be done by the same developer or would be done. It might be a preference issue. I'm certain it is related to financing the project, just as we heard earlier with Dale Street, that when you have a mixed tenure between rental and ownership, you basically need to do it as 2 lots. Altogether, the process moving forward with that, the town could decide to do that. It's whether or how Lot 3 and Lot 1 go. You could do it. You could try to do it concurrently and put that out to bid that way and see if somebody responds. That is an option.
But from the standpoint of the comprehensive permit, we couldn't issue a comprehensive permit.
You'd have to issue 2.
16, you would have to be 2.
It'd be 2.
Hinckley would still have to meet. It'd have to be 4 affordable and 12
We'd
market
still
rate.
we'd end up still with the same issue, is that what would happen, I think, effectively is even if you did use one lot as the loss leader, because that's certainly, you offset the cost of one with the other, that's certainly something to look at. I think the issue that we're still circling back to is because of the lack of availability to Medfield residents based on the capital A, capital H affordable housing requirements, whether it's income or asset limits. We're trying to make the maximum number of units available either to Medfield residents or people at that price point. And so a market rate avenue rather than a 40B avenue is ultimately more likely.
But you
So
still
Courtney, can I just ask so with the Hinckley property, the point I made earlier was that it's almost come up to me that it would be more effective not to make them 40B at all and just make them all market rate.
That's our recommendation, that if we're trying to hit that price point, the most likely avenue of getting there is to eliminate the affordable housing, which is automatically a loss on a developer's balance sheet. So to avoid the losses from affordable units being offset by an increase in market rate unit prices, because the subsidy comes from somewhere and it generally is coming from the market rate units, to keep the price of the market rate units, which would be open and available to Medfield residents that are over asset or over income, to keep that price point lower if we do not trigger inclusionary zoning and if we do not put affordable units in there, there is some potential to offset.
Through a senior housing overlay district.
Through a senior housing overlay district. We do need to facilitate via the...
No inclusionary?
Inclusionary does not apply to single-family development, and so if this were permitted as a subdivision of single-family homes after the disposition, inclusionary zoning would not be triggered.
The overlay zoning would allow you to effectively regulate the price by specifying the size and layout of the units. It would just fit into the economies.
Is there any way, I'm concerned with Gus's issue, that if you sell them as affordable units, and then 2 years later, somebody buys one for $350 and sells it for $700,000, and you've lost the affordability. Is there any way to write into the deed for market rate housing some way to retain the affordability? Because if not,
But if it's
I don't
market rate,
see
it
why
won't
the
help.
town should subsidize people who are gonna make a killing buying property for $350 and selling it for $700 2 or
So-
3 years later.
So our perspective is that the town cannot assist in this development, if this is to happen and this is to be
But as the
developed.
owner, can we put restrictions on the
No,
sale of that
legally you
property?
cannot. So the only way you
Well,
can.
then we ought to pass a law to change it.
Well, no,
Well,
that's, my point is by zoning, if you define this overlay district, the size of the units that are built have some, yeah, they may appreciate, but they're not gonna appreciate that dramatically if it's, for instance, only a two-bedroom unit that's laid out.
A ranch here in Medfield still sells for
Right, under
350,000 or something
So,
like that.
so here's,
An older ranch.
so
or a new
here's,
ranch,
here's
so-
here's kind of our legal framework that we're working with. If the town sells the lot for fair market value, there is no subsidy, and the town, we think, would need to sell the lot for fair market value, because if there is no affordable housing, there is no public benefit, and therefore the town legally cannot sell the lot for a reduced price. The town doesn't have the authority to give resources from, public resources to individuals. And so we're actually avoiding the issue of subsidizing anything, and we are merely facilitating the private market to step up to the plate and provide this type of housing. And so in order to do that, the town would develop an RFP, which would detail the vision largely from what comes out of the senior housing study, and what's been discussed with the cottage. I know is an unfavorable word. It's an architectural buzzword, so just so everybody knows, right now it means cute, smaller houses with a little front porch and whatnot.
The buzz has not made it to Medfield.
Yeah, in any event, I like the idea of senior appropriate housing, because that's what we're talking about at the end of the day. But how we're trying to get there is to adjust the market rate down simply by adjusting the density, first of all, through zoning to allow for this to be built to begin with. Right now, the property is not zoned for commercial or for residential use, so you couldn't build housing there if you wanted to. So we want to be able to facilitate the building of housing through zoning. We want to facilitate it at a density that will support the development, which is consistent with what's being identified, and that also goes in the RFP. And we want it to be available to Medfield seniors. And so how we are circling to get there without triggering any issues with public benefits or disposition or our whole multitude of state and federal regulations. Again, moving forward by simply facilitating market rate development is probably the clearest path.
We would be able to tilt the scale in the direction of Medfield seniors on that initial sale?
So here's the thing. The answer is no. On the market rate, it's a first come, first served situation. And in order to tilt it, the only way to tilt it is with capital A, capital H affordable housing and through the local preference, which again, your seniors are not going to be eligible for. So trying to adjust for the issues in the state system that do not work for you, we do believe a level of affordability is inherent to this development because A, it is age restricted, and unlike a standard ranch in Medfield, which is available to anybody who might want to buy it of any age, senior housing is restricted to an age group, which automatically is restricting the size of the market and the amount of that would be competing for it. And so that has a way of impacting price both by limiting the demand to only this group, and also because the units are smaller, there's also a natural mechanism built into it.
And that has to be marketed properly so as to not run afoul of the federal fair housing.
Boom.
Why can't you combine those two properties as market rate?
The apartment building cannot be done as a market rate because that will absolutely trigger inclusionary zoning.
The apartment building, we have to do it as a 40B. We can't build 42 apartments and not have anything added to the SHI. And the only way to do that, if it's going to be market rate, I'd rather have a sports complex. I mean, if we're going to, the only reason to do it is to add these 42 units to the SHI with the added tax benefit to it. I mean, it's a great addition to the housing production plan if we do it that way. If it's 42 market, 42 market rate rezoning for, the lot 3 is how many acres?
think the usable part is up over I read one thing, it's 5.4 or something like that that was the senior housing study that referred to that. So,
Well, I
unless
mean,
the
that's
glaciers
the
are
detail in
coming
the
back.
process, right? I mean, we have to execute it correctly, but we shouldn't say no because we might not execute it correctly. What's that?
I said you're only talking about you're only talking about 6 units that you would fall short if you didn't have affordables in both.
What do you mean?
Percent, right?
What do you mean?
He's talking about the
43 and 16 is 59.
Yeah, he's talking about the difference in the total number of housing units for 2020, what the hit is for affordable if the apartment building were market rate.
I'm not
Again,
suggesting it
apartment
should
building
be,
can't
but
No, it's 42 because all 42 of them will count. I mean,
yeah,
if
but,
it's a
but
40B
I'm
rental
talking about
project,
your
all
short-
42
I'm
will
talking about
count.
your shortfall.
Yeah, he's talking
talking the
about
shortfall.
he's talking, if there's 40 units of housing developed and none of them are affordable, your impact would be 4 units extra for each.
So whatever you do elsewhere, whether it's the hospital or elsewhere, you
terms of
only
putting
need
you
to
further
pick
in
up
the
4.
hole, but this is a
You only
golden
need to pick up
opportunity to get
4
us
more
further
units.
out of the hole, though.
And I also showed you up there where you can pick up those 4 units just by moving from one building to another.
You can. Well, we're not going to add the hospital to this already lengthy discussion. So.
I'm gonna take times off our agenda.
Can we say we're done with this?
You only
Bring
have
Pete
2
back in
times
here?
to start with, or 3.
And declare that it's 7:45 somewhere?
I hear you and I'm working on it.
Welcome back, Pete.
So it's 7:45, and it's time for our 7:45 appointment with the Friends of the Rail Trail for request to sign rail trail grant application. Christian
One of those
Donner.
legislative things
Are
where
you
they
sure we
stop
don't
the
have to
clock at
reopen the
midnight?
meeting again just because it's been so long?
Have to re-advertise it.
Do you want me over here?
Sure. You have to be at a microphone, so that's good.
All right, so I'm not 100% sure where you want me to start and how much you know about the purpose of my appearance here tonight.
We got a copy in the email today of your warrant article and your grant request.
So the warrant article, I'm working with Mike and Mark, and we aren't quite done yet, but we're getting there. But the agenda item is for the request to the Board of Selectmen to sponsor and sign and file a grant application with the DCR Recreational Trails Program. They have a grant program that is very well funded this year. And in the context of the warrant article and some other things that have been aligning favorably recently, I think that we have a really good shot this year to get this done, or get it started in earnest, rather. And so this is one puzzle piece, but it's an important one, because we have the opportunity to get the $50,000 or possibly $100,000, and we're still working on qualifying what the chances are for getting the larger amount. There has to be a regional importance for the project, and it's not entirely clear if we can document that. We might. So it's either going to be $50,000 or $100,000. There are no obligations. It needs to be spent within 2 years after it has been awarded, and they usually award these grants in the fall of this year. So we wouldn't know at town meeting yet whether we get it or not. And and it's a pay-as-you-go type of grant. That means you file expenses receipts for contractors or construction or implementation-related costs, and then you get reimbursed by the DCR for that up to the amount. There's a 20% match requirement. That means when we apply for $50,000, the town has to match $12,000 or whatever the amount is, the 20%. And that can be in kind. So, for example, the DPW removing the rails on Farm Street would probably more than qualify for that within that 2-year time frame. Just an example. I mean, we have to work out the details, but I just want to point out that match requirement is there. And that's pretty much it. So the details are in the draft that you have received. We're still working on finalizing it, but it's about 95% done.
Application?
The draft, I emailed the draft application, and there's also one in there as well.
And we can apply for this again next year, so, this is the, you know, the shot for 2018. But, of course, nobody knows where these programs are, you know, where they're going and whether this is still gonna be available next year. So this is one of the reasons why we would like to target the larger amount if we can.
The larger amount being the 50,000?
100,000. 100,000 is kind of the maximum that they would award to a single project in a given year, provided there is a regional importance to the project.
Questions?
And I apologize, I must have missed this in the stuff that was sent, so I apologize for asking. So does the town have to put up any money for this?
The match requirement,
Oh, so you have to
the
put it half.
20%, but it can be in kind, 20%
20%.
of the grant award,
But
of
it
the
can be
grant
in
amount.
It can be in kind.
It can be in kind.
Yeah.
Labor counts, prevailing rates, so,
So the DPW could do some work and that could
Correct,
be the
yes.
20,000?
right, it just needs to be documented and,
In order to use these funds, do you have to have a lease on the property so that you can do the work on it?
yes.
So we would have to buy the insurance.
Well, the expectation is that the rail trail article will pass this year at town meeting, that we will sign the lease, buy the insurance, and start work within 2 years after the grant is awarded.
Okay, and that would be the 60,000, that would be the town's expenditure.
Could I maybe if it would be helpful, I can comment on some of this, because you all know where I've been up to this point.
So we have to decide if it would be helpful before you hear a comment?
I'm
I'm
just
just kidding,
offering.
I'm kidding. Oh, yeah. Please do, guys.
There were, no, just to review this, when this first came up, I think Christian first brought it to the warrant committee, and the snag at the time for me was the indemnification on the environmental liability, and I told Christian back then, gee, philosophically, I think it would be great to have this, but don't come back unless you got an answer for the indemnification. 6 months ago or so, we had another discussion around this, and what came out unexpectedly to me was concerns by the Norfolk Hunt Club about the interference that hikers and others, dog walkers on this trail might have with the operations of the Norfolk Hunt Club. And given what the Norfolk Hunt Club represents in this town by way of stewards of a lot of open space that both makes this a unique aspect of the town and keeps development out of a big chunk of the town, I absolutely didn't want to cross that. I've had several conversations, one with Michael today by way of an email I sent to Gil, and the Norfolk Hunt Club, as I understand it, has actually reversed its position on the rail trail itself. It sees the construction of the rail trail that we're talking about the 1.3 miles here in Medfield, actually as an important trail to help the Hunt Club get access to the state hospital property by not having to hack through all the streets of Medfield, but actually be able to use the rail trail to get all the way to Harding, or all the way actually to Ice House Road. So you cross Harding Street, but that's about it. So it's actually, instead of being a liability that they don't want to see, at this point, they're viewing it as an asset that would actually enhance their operation. So that piece is completely off the table for me. I now understand, I've got the wording here from the lease, but I even understand why MBTA might be doing this, even though maybe it's stupid. The MBTA, well, it's economically stupid, but I think I understand why legally it makes sense. We have two options. One is to not take out any insurance and assume that unlimited liability for all past, present, and future environmental liabilities that might be associated with the rail bed. The second is to take out a 5-year liability insurance policy in the first 5 years of the lease. That would be $60,000 for the 5 years of insurance. At the end of that 5 years, then we are not indemnifying the MBTA at all. So we've basically taken the environmental liability that I was concerned with off the table. So as I see this, the challenge will be, so the price tag for this rail trail to the town is the town being willing to spend $60,000 for a 5-year liability insurance policy. to avoid the indemnification. Michael,
So is that a change to the former lease?
apparently
I
not,
thought
apparently
the
not, because
indemnification before
Needham,
was in perpetuity.
language.
yeah, we just never saw that part of it. We never understood that.
It's been all the, what I shared with Gus today was the copy of the lease in Newton. And
Right.
It was
Or
the same.
Newton or Needham? Needham.
No, that was Newton, and then there's the same deal in Needham. Okay, sure.
This
They
says
used
Needham,
the
this says
same-
Needham.
Same language.
Right here.
It was the same.
Needham, this is, I only showed a little bit, I only
So-
took, I have the full presentation, that's their cost.
So
Needham-
Gus,
Needham did take out the liability insurance.
you could argue it's not particularly a cost-effective by itself, a particularly good insurance policy, but the MBTA requires, they give you two options. Either do this, where you have full exposure, or do that, and we want you to, they don't really say, it's really up to you. So it makes sense, yeah.
So we wouldn't buy the policy to get coverage, but we buy us out of the indemnification, really, right? And the $60,000 that I had in the warrant article are at the high end. Don't have a firm quote. We just have a preliminary range that was between 40 and 60,000. There used to be a matching program that the state paid half of that, so it would reimburse the towns. That unfortunately is no longer funded. We learned, so that's why it is higher this year than it was last year and previous years.
Well, that is a big change.
Yeah.
'Cause I had understood it to be perpetual indemnity, and you could get insurance for the first 5 years, but no one would insure you beyond that, but you still had to indemnify them.
Yeah,
But you don't.
that's what I thought
So you buy
too.
the insurance, the indemnity goes away?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's an either or.
There's the wording, there's the wording.
I agree with you on one part of what you said, Gus, but it seems like it's a pretty good deal for the town. Well, that's pretty good. Has Mark Sorrell looked at it?
I don't think Mark has.
Mark has disappeared before this discussion.
Well, I shared this with Mark last year, but I think, I didn't point out the relevance of that paragraph.
Right.
We
Yeah, I
let,
mean,
we let
that's-
Mark take a nap at 9:30 if we go.
I wish I were on that, multitasking.
Mark, the topic is the rail trail. The issue is taking out, if we take out 5 years of environmental liability insurance, then we don't have to indemnify the MBTA for the life, the past, present, and future environmental liabilities for a rail bed. That's the wording that would be in the lease. So I think people were just asking you to take a look at it and see if you'd have any heartburn. There's still a $60,000 price tag associated with it, but that would preclude us indemnifying the MBTA.
That's not what I'm here for. I just want to point this out. I'm here for the grant application, but it's obviously I understand you want to clarify this point before you support the grant application. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It says what it says with the caveat of unless federal law requires otherwise. What that would cost, I have no idea.
And you also have to follow so-called best practices.
Yeah.
You're supposed to properly cap the trail, you're supposed to do certain things.
Which presumably is what you would plan to do.
We're still liable.
Which is what Needham did, what Newton did, yes.
You're
Yeah.
still liable for what?
For the town. Somebody could sue the town instead of the MBTA.
No, what happens is, the T's position is, if this was simply not being utilized, then there's minimal to no exposure. But we're allowing you to bring third parties on, and that's increasing our, being the T's exposure. And if you're going to be the mechanism by which that happens, then we're gonna hold you responsible. So if we, the T, get sued, we're going to expect you to, in lawyer terms, indemnify and hold us harmless.
And that makes sense if it's during the time that you're constructing the rail trail. They're basically saying during this 5-year period when stuff would be happening, that's when we need you to protect us. That part I understand.
Well, what would happen down the road, say somebody had a well adjacent to the rail trail and it got polluted? and they were able to trace the origins of the pollution to the oil or chemicals that had that had been deposited along the rail bed. Could the town potentially be held liable for the damage created to that well?
Not unless you showed that the town had done something to be an instrumentality during that time period. Frankly, the more likely scenario is, over that period of time, long-term exposure to some substance that was there that nobody knew about, ends up with some kind of illness or something like that, and that's who brings the claim.
And I know we've had one where they went back and found all the parties that had contributed to a landfill, and we had to pay $5,000 or $6,000 for a landfill in Clinton, I think.
Yeah, because that was transporting, that was specific statutory, but to say there's no liability or any kind of assurances, there was a memo done on this for Needham or Dover, I forget which, but it was Anderson and Krieger, who was a respected municipal and environmental firm, and they were unwilling to give any kind of blanket assurances to their community. So you just need to go in with your eyes open and make a choice accordingly.
It was Dover. Oops, sorry.
I've raised a question before about the fact that...
Microphone, Bill?
Yeah. I purposely took it away, so you could say, yes.
I had raised a question before, my concern before was more about the town's well. Now that we have the hospital tubular well field, which purportedly has 500,000 gallons a day capacity or whatever, and I look at some of the forecasts for water usage and potential shortages and everything else, and my only concern is, were there insecticides or herbicides or anything else used along the trail that may have, gone into the soil and worked their way towards our well?
The likelihood is more you would have to go back and evaluate what kinds of loads were being transported back and forth and determine leakage or potential leakage.
What I had suggested, or I had thrown out, I don't claim to be some kind of an expert or anything else, I just said, why wouldn't we drill a test well somewhere between the rail trail and our town well to see if there's anything there? I mean, for the sake of, $5,000 or $10,000.
Well, Water and Sewer just did test wells in connection with the iron manganese study of the hospital well, and they found, they ruled it out as a potential water supply.
Yeah, there's a problem with that, because I have quotes from Feeney and DCAM that says it's got 500,000 gallons a day. I mean, I'd like somebody to, but again,
my point is you couldn't drill enough test wells to provide the assurances. There's just too many variables.
Well, and as to
Yeah,
Mike's
I mean,
question,
obviously, if you dug a well and you hit something, that's a no-brainer. But the fact that you're not hitting anything, the opposite doesn't apply. That
it's not
negates
on its
there
way
being
or coming or
right.
whatever.
We have a town well down at Wheelock that's 50 feet or 30 feet away from an active railroad that does get sprayed on, and insecticides, pesticides, herbicides cleared out. So
Can I
Just
make
saying, we're drinking that water, right?
Can I make a suggestion, Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
So, I mean, the issue we have to decide tonight is whether to support this grant application.
Yes, please.
It's a pay-as-you-go grant application. Nothing's going to happen with it until after town meeting. Town meeting's going to decide yay or nay on the rail trail.
Right.
Does anyone think that if town meeting says yay on the rail trail, we shouldn't get this grant?
I don't.
All right. Does anyone think if town meeting says no on the rail trail, we're going to get this grant? So I think we should go ahead with the grant application and then sort out the merits of the rail trail on another evening, and we can schedule Christian to come in at 10:30 to make sure he doesn't sit through the rest of it. Okay, so I would move that we support the rail trail. I think $20,000 is a reasonable amount if the town meeting decides to go ahead and do this for the town's contribution, and that will just be added to the cost that the people have to decide at the town meeting. So I would move that we support the request to sign the rail trail grant application.
Second.
Any further discussion? No. All those in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Christian. Citizen comment?
Lots of sign up tonight, right, Christine? So here we go, citizen comment.
Action items. Request from Dr. Marsden, Superintendent, to appoint a member of the Board of Selectmen to the School Building Committee for Dale Street project. Anybody interested in working on that?
I am willing to do it.
I stated the same, Mike Quinlan called me on this, I stated the same thing, assuming this is after the ALS study committee, but I told Mike that I actually thought, Mike, that you struck me as the most appropriate one.
Thank you, guys.
Only because you've been so intimately involved with buildings and you have kids that are in school.
This is your revenge for all those last three discussions.
Well, let me explain something first. I was at a permanent planning and building committee meeting last week, and the size of this committee, you're required to appoint it because school building assistants insist that this is how it be done. And it ends up with 12 people on it, which is really a little bit more than workable. So the feeling is, and Tim is on the school committee, he's on the planning and building committee, the feeling is probably the committee will do something on the, what are we gonna teach and what classrooms and the layout of the building, but the actual oversight of the bidding and construction process will be delegated to the Permanent Planning and Building Committee. So I think it's more likely to be in the planning and, what are we going to put in this building? And rather than weekly meetings with hard hats and.
Right, is the attendance record of all the members of the committee factored into the state's willingness to support a particular project, to your knowledge?
Yeah,
If you were to
I
miss a
don't
meeting
think
or
so.
two, would that affect the?
No.
Okay.
No.
I mean, I'm happy to do this and make whatever contributions are fine, and I'm happy to have you do it, Gus. I mean, I'm just, with the Affordable Housing Trust and the collective bargaining, I've got a few things, and the Capital Budget Committee and a few things. But I'm willing to do this on the presumption that, I
Yeah.
can't be here every week at 7 o'clock in the morning looking at plans for 2 years, or 3 years, or 5 years.
No, and I don't think you're going to be expected
And
to
if
do
it turns
that.
out that way, and I can convince Pete, we could always remove me and appoint Gus, right?
Yes.
I mean,
All right.
my preference for you is sincere, Mike. I just thought you were closer to the issues.
That's fine. I will move that we appoint Mr. Marcucci as the representative to the School Building Committee for the Dale Street
Can I second
project.
it
And
yet? Second.
if my phone starts lighting up, my wife is still watching
All
at
those
home.
in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Request from Fire Chief Selection Committee to sign badge quest contract for Fire Chief candidate search.
We actually talked about this last fall. We went out to bid and we had two bidders come back. We went to badge quest. I was not able to get you the contract until now because we were waiting for the warrant committee to sign the new contract transfer.
Okay.
That's been signed and now it's ready to go.
Okay.
And we're probably at least a third of the way through the project at this point.
And Mr. Sorrell has reviewed the contract?
It is his contract.
Oh.
Yeah,
Even better. A Sorrell original. All right.
Gave a good housekeeping seal of approval at the end.
As modified by the assistant town administrator, I'm sure.
Just a little.
Customized.
So do we have a motion to?
I would move
sign
that we sign the badge quest contract for the fire chief candidate search.
Thank you.
Second.
All those in favor? Yep.
Aye.
Maurice Goulet, DPW Director, requests the Selectmen to sign Chapter 90 request for $30,000 for conceptual design services for Main Street, Route 109, from Millis Line to Hartford Street.
And he has a memo there for each of you, explaining exactly why he is requesting the $30,000.
And I may have triggered that memo because I basically, given that he did the project on Main Street through the center of town, because we weren't expecting anything from the state for another 10 years, I said, why are we now doing a conceptual plan for something that we didn't think was going to happen for 10 years? And I haven't read the memo yet.
I haven't either. What
It's
can you
basically
explain
you,
what-
you have to start planning for it now in order to get on the tip list to be
Okay.
considered. So he said, even though he's not planning on it for the 10 years, he actually has to start, he's not planning on building it, he has to actually start planning for it. So he's looking for some conceptual.
Gotta
This
get
is
into-
just an on-schedule start for the 10-year project. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Into the
And-
mix.
Do we have a motion then?
I would move that we sign the Chapter 90 request for design services for Main Street, Route 109, from Millis Line to Hartford Street.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Yep. Request to sign contract amendment for Community Opportunities Group, Inc.
We're going to actually move this. I was not able to get a copy of the contract today. We're going to actually move it to the next meeting on the 27th.
It's in the mail, my apologies.
Yes.
So
If
Courtney,
I
for,
were an inch in the other direction, I could have could have picked this up yesterday and brought it home.
Courtney, for the record, don't assume just because we blew through those last two that that's how this works all the time.
You know, that's okay. That's up to you guys to debate our value, not mine.
Don't put it too early on the agenda or it'll be a
Late on the
1-hour
agenda.
discussion, yes.
Wait till you're plucky and tired. Well, then in that case, I'm gonna submit a different amendment for more money.
71 North Street is the Borelli project that you approved the LIP that has been filed with the Zoning Board of Appeals. There is a departmental review request in your packet, and we will start going through that, and we will have COG reviewing that as well.
What about this request to vote you to authorize you to sign the DHCD letter for 80 North Meadows?
Oh, I skipped that one, I'm sorry. Yes, we have received notification from DHCD. They've received the application, and even though you've already written your first letter of support, we have now reviewed it again, and we will issue a second letter of support now that it has been officially filed.
A
that's
strenuous
okay,
letter of
I
support.
will-
We vote to authorize, I move that we authorize Christine Trueweiler to submit a letter of support to DHCD on behalf of the Board of Selectmen for the 40B LIP project at 80 North Meadows
Is
Road.
there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And then what, do we need to do anything more, Chris, with the 71 North Street ZBA application?
No, we'll take care of reviewing that
Okay.
for you, and your comments, and I will submit that for your comments and review before we actually submit it to the ZBA. The timeline is,
The public hearing scheduled for March 8th.
Right.
Mike, I have to comment, you're getting so much more adept at crafting these motions as the year goes by.
That's true. Well, it comes with experience, Gus.
We are accepting the resignation of Michael Thompson from the Kingsbury Pond Committee. Board of Selectmen are invited to attend the Eagle Scout Court of Honor on February 10, 2 p.m. at the Church of the Advent for 4 different scouts.
so you sign the certificates before you leave, and will somebody bring them with them?
I plan to attend,
Okay,
so,
perfect.
who's gonna be at that one?
I'll be there too.
I won't be there. I already sent my
Okay,
regrets.
so that's for
to them.
Patrick O'Connor, Kyle Haney, Evan CP, and Mark Fitzpatrick. And discussion about the committee appointment and charter process.
Yes, I'll sign this letter.
Who was looking for this issue?
That was Mike's draft, I think.
Yes.
Yes, you should all have a copy.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a great thing, Mike. Thank you for doing that. Create some sort of protocol for how we deal with committee appointments.
I have 1, 2, 3. I did my homework. I looked at your draft.
Well done.
Yours,
A lot
that's
of red
one.
ink there, Gus.
It's a lot of it's not really that much. 1, 2, 3, and I liked your draft. I liked what you were trying to do. And I just did my homework before we got here, so I'll give you my feedback. This was your draft, and we should start with you on anything you'd like to say, though.
Yeah, no, I, just looking at your comments, on the second bullet, I've kind of come around to your view on this, that sort of the committees that have regular jobs to do probably shouldn't fall under this jurisdiction. I mean, I think we should find a different way. You know, I think Pete's approach of having a calendar for dealing with these folks, or we should find a regular way to be checking in with those boards as well. And
To that point, Mike, just so you know what this second thing was, what I did, this was that earlier cut that I did of the 104 committees and positions. The ones that are highlighted in yellow, I took your list, and you'll see it's either your Exhibit A or Exhibit B, but what the reason for doing it is all the ones that aren't designated, to realize if this is our policy, if you accept the way I've classified all these, you see the magnitude of the issue. Okay.
Yep. And so I think we should take the Exhibit B committees, the standing committees off, but then figure out another way, you know, a different way to have a regular checking with them. And what I was trying to do with this process is try to use the summer a little bit.
Yeah.
Because the summer is slower.
Yep.
And I think one of the reasons why the calendar Pete put together sort of slips in terms of regular meetings with the committees, is that during the year, it's really hard to do because there's so many exigent things that come up, and so if there's not an immediate need to meet with Committee A, that gets bumped, and then before you know it, you haven't met with Committee A in 2 years because there was something. So trying to use that summer time, and if, doing stuff in writing obviates the need for people to have to come. So I would agree with taking Exhibit B off. And I think you did a better job than me identifying all of these committees. I think there's some of these that would go on the Exhibit A list.
Yeah.
I think all of those would go on the Exhibit A list that you have in yellow.
So I thought the direction you were trying to take it was the right direction.
Yeah.
I thought the process that you laid out called out the right things.
So the reason I used appointed and not established is that we do have some committees that get established by other means. And like, for example, the Senior Housing Study Committee was established by a town meeting article. And so I still think we ought to, if we are going to be responsible for appointing the members, even if it's created some other way,
Yeah, okay.
I think we should still try to exercise.
There are statutory committees that you appoint the members.
Right, and that was the Exhibit B ones that I think we should take them off.
So we'll stick with appointed.
Yeah. And I think, just looking at the Exhibit C, I think the note about the dates meetings held, I agree, delete, either please attach minutes or they should all be on the website.
Yeah.
So we can just delete those and just put the dates.
Yep.
Give us the dates. Yeah, I think the second question there, Gus, at the bottom, you put your finger on it, whether it should be reduced in size. Or otherwise changed, I guess, if you needed different qualifications, kind of.
Right. So Christine, I will send you the electronic copy of this, and then you can distribute appropriately to.
Perfect.
And I think all of the committees that Gus has in yellow on here, as I see it, can be added to this Exhibit A. We don't even need Exhibit A anymore, right? Because we're getting rid of the Exhibit B concept. We should still have an Exhibit A, though, just so it's clear. I think everything that's on there.
This will incentivize us to reduce the number of committees. we
Reduce the
have.
number of committees and maybe for committees to self-reduce by saying we've outlived our useful purpose. And
You made us fill out a form. we
I've
don't
got to
really
fill
have.
out, right. If filling out the form is too much work, that probably is a sign that you don't need the committee anymore. So, all right, good.
All right,
So,
that's a great process to establish that protocol, thank you.
I think we should think about in terms of those other boards and committees, maybe not the ZBA, but for some of the other ones where it's going to intersect with other stuff, some regular check-in or
I
something.
mean, some of those committees that wouldn't be in this are actually important committees to
Right,
talk to with
right.
those issues, so it's not,
Right. All right.
that's maybe not part of this review process.
Let's see, discuss assignment of the 2018 annual town meeting warrant articles.
Can that wait, or?
Yeah, that can wait, sure.
Okay, yeah,
I
let's
do
put that
need
off.
the wording on a couple of articles, though, those two articles that are on the list for the zoning overlay district and for the selectmen's article on affordable housing.
Those are gonna be put off until the fall, I thought.
Yeah, I think, I'm sorry to make Pete get up again, but I think in terms of Hinckley, my view, based on the advice from COG, is that we should not have an article this year on Hinckley.
Okay,
Let's go
so,
through the rest of
so
the
we'll
process.
delete both of those articles for the
Yeah.
warrant. And then, so that will leave 5
You
articles.
agree with that, Gus?
Which two are you deleting?
This
The
would
20 and
be-
21?
21, looks like 20 and 21.
So do we have the selectmen's article in response to the 4 or 5 citizen petition?
Well, the
articles?
citizen petitions have to stay on there.
No, I know,
because
but
they
we were
yeah.
gonna have an article that we were hoping could replace all 4 or 5 of those.
Right.
Well, you certainly could speak on any one of them, or if they're taken up as a group, as to what your proposal is to address the issue.
Right.
In the course of discussion, and then presumably recommend to the town meeting that they vote these all down or table them or something.
I think as to your specific question, based on the memo from COG, we have 3 to 6 months worth of work to do before we're in a position to present those articles to town meeting.
So our official position against all of these would be,
You don't have a
everyone
lot.
is premature.
You don't have a lot to dispossess right now, so, the warrant articles that have been put forward by petition are discussing the Hinckley lot in its current configuration, but it's our understanding that a portion of the senior center lot is intended to be allocated as part of the lot for Hinckley. And there's also some discussion about an urban wild or an open space parcel being excised as well as a single family lot. So right now, while there are warrant articles that have been submitted by citizen petition, the lot that would be sold is the lot as it exists today, which is not the lot that is intended to be developed.
So they're all, a number of them have procedural or substantive legal issues with them, and I think they all require a 2/3 vote on top of that, because I looked quickly, so.
So we need a subdivision to occur to get the lot into a configuration that is ready for sale, to clear up some issues with chain of title, to clear up some issues. There's actually a number of issues, but I think the easiest way to put it is that while there is a market for lots that don't exist, those are generally bought by suckers. So we'd like to get you a lot that exists so that you can sell it.
Article 22 was put in by the Senior Housing Study Committee, but, when I discussed this with Mark, he said you already have that authority.
No, there's
No,
two
we
things
don't.
that I would,
That's the Hinckley
No.
program. 22
That's
is
not
Hinckley.
on the Hinckley, okay.
There's one of them that
Okay.
you have, yeah, so
So
I
we-
have my notes somewhere on it.
So
Lot
we,
one has authorization for
lot
disposition,
three,
but
lot three has already been
or lot three.
disposed of, yeah.
lot 3 has, okay, so we need to leave Article 22 in there.
22 is lot 1, is Hinckley.
Is lot 1, yeah.
So our advice is to wait to dispossess until you have a subdivision that is legal and filed, and put that lot, reference that lot specifically in the warrant article for disposition.
And we have to go through the planning board.
We pretty much agreed on the land on the ground, it's just a matter of making that legally reflect the agreement of the parties.
So I apologize for being a little dense on this. So the first thing we need to do is subdivide the lot in the configuration
You
that
need
adds
to
in the
create
COA
this
land.
lot.
You need to do
Create
a
the lot we really
survey
want.
and perform a legal subdivision through the,
And that's that doesn't require any town meeting action, that's just a legal process to get the subdivision redefined or defined.
I'm gonna defer to your counsel there.
Yes.
I believe you have.
What I'm,
It's coming from different chains of title. The Ice House Road subdivision was purchased as one acquisition, Hinckley is another. This proposed lot doesn't take all of Hinckley, but it takes some of the land from the Ice House subdivision. So you have to create that lot, show it on a plan, which will effectively probably be a subdivision plan, although it hypothetically could be a different kind of, called an A&R plan, but whatever you do,
The
it
end
needs a
result,
plan.
if you call it a
It's
subdivision,
a
regardless of
recordable
whether or not
plan.
you're cutting it
Yeah.
up or not, it's just reconfiguring the lot line so that what you're
Right.
selling is matching what you think you're
where,
selling.
where, yeah, and the place I'm coming from is of all the, in light of our discussion earlier in the meeting here, of all the things that it's gonna take us time to work through by way of addressing senior housing needs. This seemed to be at one point, like up until a week ago, the one thing that maybe would be through the chute faster, and now I'm trying to figure out what's the reasonable time frame to expect. Is it,
Well, I mean, based on their
Here from
memo
now-
is 3 to 6 months.
Huh?
You needed 3 to 6 months worth of time, because you've also got to go through the planning board process to create the senior housing overlay district.
right, and then,
So I think the timing would be, if we wanted to do a special town meeting in the fall for it, we
and
could.
if you did that, chances are you'd actually be undertaking a project next spring. I'm
Yeah,
not
no,
being
this is-
critical, I'm just trying to
No, this is,
understand.
this is actually what you're, we are actually trying, we have the same purpose, which is trying to do this as quickly as
Yeah,
possible.
yeah.
And so, however, in order to do it as quickly as possible, the one thing that we can't get around is that the town needs to do the survey and the subdivision needs to be
I mean, the
done. From
only
there,
issue-
we can work on the RFP, we can work on the zoning language, that can be
Right.
done concurrently, but there's a few procedural things that need to happen to get
Okay.
it ready. for
I don't know if we're trying to get the county engineers to do it, if that's so, that would take a little bit longer.
There's a request in.
There's a request in, but I think we need to have it, so we can get going faster. County engineers are overwhelmed.
But even with a private engineering or surveying firm, the fact of the matter is, with a good economy out there, their work's in demand, and they're affected by by weather, they can't, obviously, they've got to be able to locate things.
Well, and part of this for me is a couple of meetings ago, I talked about, I saw this is the first project to exercise the process. And I'm glad we're doing it, because all of a sudden we've already hit the first obstacle to doing it. And by the time we get all the way through it, we'll find other obstacles undoubtedly.
We have hit so many obstacles, most of them legal, but, and this is kind of the beginning of the housekeeping just to get things ready to go to market.
And ironically, we had, as I recall, a perimeter plan prepared when we acquired Ice House Road subdivision, because we wanted to be able to get affirmative title insurance at the time. There was a history of title issues on that parcel, having to do with railroad right-of-ways. So,
But I think for the purposes of this, we're agreed we're not gonna have an article in the town. We can't do it by April.
So we'll drop those two articles.
21,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And in the best of all worlds, we, I guess, Selectmen would find some way to have a conversation with Tony and the proponents of all these, rather than have all these articles show up and get told one after the other, this won't work, this won't work.
it seemed to me, with a good faith showing that you're proceeding to do
Right.
this, and it's basically what,
Right.
in response to what they've been asking for and what they want.
Unfortunately, we can persuade everybody in this room and won't advance the ball on that front, so I think we can deal with that another.
They want it tomorrow.
Right.
Okay.
So our next item is the discussion of the continued role of the Medfield Hospital Master Planning Committee as Lot 3 in Hinckley.
Do we, we're not gonna go through the warrants again?
No.
But I think maybe our homework for after this meeting can go through and write down which ones we each of us would like to cover. And then when we reconvene, we can go through and see which ones we're responsible
Yeah,
for.
don't go by numbers, though, because with the two articles you dropped, all the numbers changed now.
No, that's all right. I'm not worried about the numbers. I'm worried about, these are not yet ready. Some of these are not.
There are some, there's some substantive things in some of these bylaws or revisions, et cetera, that you need to familiarize yourself with, so that you're not blindsided later on. For instance, the dog control bylaw that I ended up putting in place, it's not the comprehensive one that the committee was working on, but it has issues that may arise. There's other things we've drafted that you just need to be aware of.
Because are we closing the warrant?
You already closed
it.
So there's no action that's required on this right now. This is just,
Correct.
No, we were just looking, we were thinking about tonight, when I thought we had a lot more time than we do,
yeah. Okay.
that we were going to assign the warrant articles to the different selectmen to present at town meeting.
If necessary.
Right.
So at some point, I think we have one more conversation around what's here or whatever. But we don't do
Yeah.
it tonight, though. Let's not do it tonight.
Yeah, you need to assign the articles, you need to schedule people to meet, the proponents to come and meet with either
Yeah, I
the full
had
board or the
specific
partial
questions.
board.
I had
And,
specific questions on some of them.
and then the budget, you need to get the budgets that you're concerned about to have them scheduled.
Well, yeah, we determined how we were gonna do the budgets, and they'll be coming in for the next meeting.
Yeah.
So we're all good on that.
So one easy one, the streetlights article didn't survive, right?
Right,
never got
it was
the-
not submitted.
Yeah.
Good, okay.
So this next one on the continued role of the MSH MPC, that's Lot 3 in Hinckley. We discussed it briefly at the last meeting because it wasn't on the agenda. I just want to make sure it came up on the agenda.
Yep.
So I think based on our discussion last week, or was it last week?
It was last week.
Last week.
Yeah.
What's happened since then?
Yeah.
We're in agreement that they shouldn't have a continued role on it. And
Right.
so unless there's any further discussion, I would move that we just formally agree that their responsibility for those properties is at an end, and we'll pick it up from here.
I second that.
All in favor? All right, done.
Let's see, pending items, town administrator evaluation process. Can we skip that tonight?
We postponed that enough, I think we had 2 more weeks wouldn't hurt.
Townwide goals.
Getting later and later to pull yourself out of the hole, Mike.
I'm way ahead.
I think that's his plan.
I'm working on 19.
Gus and I are still working on the townwide goals distribution.
Okay.
Yes, we are.
We are.
Yes,
Annual appointments, did we hear back from the Board of Health?
Board of Health has scheduled a meeting, I believe it's next week, but they suggested anybody who was interested in joining the Board of Health, come to a Board of Health meeting to meet with them and talk to them.
So they're reaching
So-
out to Carol Reed, I assume.
I think they're asking me to do it, is really what I'm getting, so, yes. So, I will do that.
Senior Housing Survey update.
I do have an update. You got Barbara sent out both the survey, I think she copied all of us on the survey, along with the, kind of her draft of the proposed contract for the support that we'll have for the survey. So she's hoping, she's actually sent that survey out, asked the people that have been working with her to just test it out with a couple of seniors, just to see points of confusion and things like that. But presumably that survey design should be pretty close to finalized by, I would say, the end of this week or the beginning of next week at the latest. She wants to come in to talk to, I'm not, there isn't a formal committee here. She suggested that she probably should come in and present to the board. I sent her an email tonight just saying, I'll bring it up at this meeting. I wouldn't be surprised if we'll ask you to come at the next meeting, but that's open for discussion. But basically what she wants to do is present the contract for the contract support and get the Board of Selectmen's approval. It looks like the total cost, based on the draft, was what, just under $10,000.
And has she discussed this with the Senior Housing Study Committee?
No, she or Jack or Dick have been in conversations with Tony. Tony's, I think, official position is he thinks this survey isn't necessary. So they are trying to convince Tony to use his influence to get his direct people who listen to him to join in on the survey. This is a survey that the Board of Selectmen commissioned. It's a survey that I believe we're going to use to define what the senior housing plans will be for the town. I think it is not in the best interest of any senior who has an interest in that senior housing to decide to boycott this survey. But their people are going to do what they want. I would like to see Tony more actively supportive, but that's a decision that he has to make.
Right. But has he at least had a chance to see the questions and comment if he wanted to?
I don't know if he's seen the final ones, but he has seen them. And in all fairness, we used his survey, he provided his survey, and a lot of the questions are at least compatible with questions he's asked. The major difference is that his selection was somewhat random and the total sample size does not meet the minimum statistical requirement to actually be truly valid. So the group is both trying to get more specificity about some things, but also get a more valid response. They're hoping to get a third of the senior households in the town to respond. That's a bigger sample
Right.
size.
As long as they have an opportunity to participate in the process, that's fine.
They did. We would appreciate even more positive participation if they're so inclined.
Do we have a motion to approve all the licenses and permits on the consent agenda?
I have a motion to, I move that we approve the licenses and permits on the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. All right.
Town administrators update.
Okay. As I told the chairman earlier, about 4:19 this afternoon, I got an email from the town clerk saying that she would like to get the ballot for the town election to the printer next week, and she wanted to know if the selectmen would like to put any ballot questions on the ballot for the town election. Now, there are four potential ones, actually. Council on Aging is proposing hiring an OPM and a architect. They may be able to fund that out of monies they have set aside, so that might not be necessary and it might not be recommended anyway. The same thing for the Park and Rec. They are proposing to hire an OPM and a project manager for preliminary design and cost estimates for a facility for them. There's the school feasibility study that's $1.5 million. That will require an override question. The school committee and the permanent building committee are coming in at your next meeting to request that it be put on, that you call a special election after the town meeting to have an override vote, a debt exclusion override vote on that. And
The feasibility study for the school.
please?
What was that fourth one?
The fourth one is my preliminary budget estimate shows right now we need to cut about 1.1 million from the budgets in order to get to where we should be in terms of use of free cash. That would bring us back to about 1.6, 1.7 million in free cash at the end of the year. If the determination is made by the warrant committee and the selectmen in their review of the budget so that they can't get down to that figure, then you might need a ballot question for an operating override. Normally, that would be on the ballot for the annual town election, but I doubt if that decision is going to be made. It's certainly not going to be made if she's putting the ballot out next week. So it would probably have to go on the same ballot for the school override, school feasibility override. And that would be an operating override. Hopefully, we'll somehow figure out a way to get that 1.1 million squeezed out so that we don't need an override. But I'm just alerting you the possibility right now we're standing at about 1.1 million over where we should be. Part of that is, and now that's with a school budget of 4%, which is down from the 5.75, I think, they originally submitted. I've reduced the health insurance budget by about 120,000 because the rates came in lower than I budgeted for. They are still working on a high deductible plan, which could realize more savings, but that's still in the works. The other thing is, in my budget estimate, I've doubled the amount for the capital budget. Normally, we carry about 400,000 on the tax levy. I've increased that to 800,000, so that's part of the reason it's up. And the reason for doing that is the capital budget that Jerry McCarty submitted. He's actually would like to get 1.1 million for projects that he feels necessary the first year of his 20-year capital plan. I didn't feel that I could go quite that high, so I doubled the budget. Effectively, I put 400,000 in for that.
I mean, I'll say, we have to have a capital budget committee meeting.
Mm-hmm.
My view is we should be going in the opposite direction until we have a longer-term plan for how we're gonna pay for it. And so,
Some of these things cannot wait.
Well,
I mean,
but-
if you've got leaky roofs and water,
then we can look through what the.
but I think that's,
We can look
there's
through what
some,
the details are.
yes,
And
yeah.
Absent kind of a longer-term view of what we're gonna do, I don't think we can just say we're gonna do more now. Because if it's that much of an increase, then there's gonna have to be some debt exclusions or more substantial operating cuts otherwise.
Well, yeah, and the problem is, if it's a 42 million year plan for 20 years, so you're talking about roughly 2 million a year. You can't do a 2 million debt exclusion every year for 20 years. I think you'd be run out of town on a rail.
Right, but I mean, 11 million of that is Dale Street School.
No, no, that's,
It was the original 42 million, there was $11 million in Dale Street School.
for Dale's, to renovate it so it still be usable, yeah. Yeah, well, and they're a big decision. Some of these things should be done as maintenance items in the departmental budgets, so.
That's all I'm saying, is we have to kind of have a payment plan for the capital plan before we can start paying for the capital.
And Mike, I lost the bubble on the starting question here. You said that Carol asked if we needed, if the selectmen wanted anything on the ballot.
The answer is no.
Ballot presumably for the March election. The
Right.
four options you threw out, all four of them, they're all also articles or points of discussion at the annual town meeting in April
Three of them are articles, and the other is
It's
the
an
overall
operating override
picture,
if we
yeah.
need it. My point is that we probably wouldn't put any of them on the March ballot because we'd want to know what the annual town meeting ruling on the article was. I understand maybe we're trying to avoid a special election or something, but the elections on those issues should all come after the annual town meeting, right?
No, you can do either way.
You can do the override first and then the town meeting.
Yeah, we've done it both ways, yeah.
Legally, you can, practically or politically, it may.
But I don't think, we don't know enough now to say.
No, and it's unusual this year, we've never had all the budgets in so early. Now there'll be a lot of revisions in them, but they're all in. And with those two articles taken out tonight, the only thing that isn't completed is the capital budget. And so we're way ahead of the game from where we usually are. But we still don't have all the answers. And
Yeah, I could see if you had like one possible thing that had to be voted on, that you might do it ahead of time. But with these, because we don't know which ones would matter, it doesn't make sense to me we put those all up front.
Yeah.
You usually have a better grasp on the figures too for capital project.
Yeah, if of the four, the one that you would want to put on the ballot for the town election would be the operating override. But you don't really have enough sufficient information on that to put it on if the ballot, in fact, is going to the printer next week.
Plus, I would think that would improve the chances it would be voted down, because people wouldn't understand it. They'd just say no. And, you haven't had the discussion.
Possibly, yes, yeah.
Anything else from the town administrator on your report, sir?
The what?
Anything else?
We're doing your
Oh,
town
anything else?
administrator
Oh,
update.
yes.
Performance evaluation.
Yes, right. Representative Garlick did speak to me at her State of the Town presentation and also wrote a letter that if the town had any they're in their budget process right now, if the town had any projects that they would like her to try to get funded through the elaborate budget negotiations, to let her know. And I don't know if you have any preference. There's a myriad of projects that you could request. I thought we would try to see if we could come up with some money for the North Meadows Road, West Street intersection improvements. Or for the bridge. We still haven't heard yet on the bridge from, and I think those would be.
Senator Feeney asked the same question. I told you about that, so I think we should get him to.
Yes,
Garlick,
yeah.
we should get to him too.
He was working on a tighter deadline, or was this subsequent? There was something he sent you about, that had like a 2-day
Yeah.
warning for bonds or something?
I think the way it works in there, Senator Feeney doesn't have much seniority, obviously. And I think where Representative Garlick does. So she's moved up through the ranks because so many people have resigned or not run for re-election or
Representative
whatever.
Cooley seems to get money for Norfolk things too, so.
He might be able to, and we'll certainly try that, so, yeah.
Yeah, I think West Street, North Meadows, and the bridge are good projects for
Yeah,
them.
absolutely.
Yeah.
With some bigger benefit, not just the Medfield thing, 'cause it's a commuter road.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
that side of town and plus look that way too.
Yeah, those would be good.
Yes, yeah.
So do we have any selectmen's reports then? Mike?
Just very briefly, just a timing thing. Board of Housing Trust met before this meeting. We did not come to a recommendation on the Dale Street, 41 Dale Street, 40B project. But we have a draft memo that I put together. I think we decided we would give them the draft memo.
We did not.
We're not gonna give them the draft.
We're not gonna draft.
We're not giving the draft.
No.
Okay, it's a public document, you can.
Yeah, they can have
track
it.
down if you can. It was handed out to about 70 people who are here today, so you can ask one of them, or you can just take my copy that's here. Anyway, the committee is gonna put together a memo, a memo that will set out kind of what the options are, the strategic options, how this fits in, and ways to think about this project in light of everything else that's going on. The trust board had some additional follow-up information we requested from Mr. Kelly. He's gonna, when he provides that, we're gonna meet again, on the 27th before our Board of Selectmen meeting, and we've deferred, the Board of Selectmen review of the LIP to March 6th, which is the following meeting, to give some time from our next AHT meeting to then give you the memo, and then, we can review it on the 6th. And I abstain from voting on these things at the trust board. We did vote, also today to give a grant to the American Legion to hire a development consultant to assist them in evaluating their potential affordable housing project on their land, and working with developers. They have actually met with Mr. Kelly and one of his partners, who are gonna do some perk testing on the land there to get an initial take on it. If this will give them some money to get some technical expertise to evaluate what they might be able to do on that site. That's my report.
All right, Gus.
We talked a little bit about the survey, so that it's only been a week since our last meeting. Don't have a lot. There was one thing I wanted to re-raise that we discussed at the last meeting, and I should have been more on the ball. You may recall Abby Marble's request. We had the discussion around the charter change and things like that. And when I got home, I started thinking about it, and we kind of treated that as a citizen's request for some changes, not thinking about the fact that Abby's on the warrant committee. And the one thing that we missed in our discussion was, one of her requests was to change the town clerk's position from an elected position to an appointed position. And after I got home, it's like, well, that's actually not Abby just having a personal opinion. That was part of the warrant committee's actions a year ago, in discussions with Carol initially here. But the plan from the warrant committee standpoint was to convert that from an elected position to an appointed position. Now, Carol's up for re-election, so I'm guessing because those things weren't put in place, we have another term of an elected town clerk. But to the extent that Abby's request actually conveyed an intent of the warrant committee to convert that position over, we shouldn't lose sight of that. We probably should take action over the next term, if that's what the town wants to do, or that's what we want to do, to actually put that mechanism in place to bring that about. So I don't think it happens now, but
I think that's a
It's a
charter.
town
committee.
meeting action followed by a ballot question if it passes in town.
What was it? It's not a charter issue?
Not a charter issue?
It is a charter issue, but
So that's
it falls into the category of a simple charter change.
Oh.
So you don't
So you don't
have to
need a
have a
charter
charter commission.
What?
You don't need a charter commission?
so that's something, I wouldn't suggest we do it this year, right after a re-election, but that's probably something we should either do next year. And Carol's been involved in these conversations, so it's not like there's anything, I don't think there's anything sensitive here, but it's probably something we should look at doing either next year or the following year at the absolute latest.
Is she in favor of the change?
I think she was accepting of the change, and I don't know how that maps into her retirement plan. So I don't think she was resistant, but I don't know whether she forced herself to. I just don't know. So. But anyway, we had kind of dismissed it as a random request from a citizen, and it's like, no, this was from Abby, and she's on the warrant committee.
Yeah, the other issue she brought up several times was increasing the size of the Board of Selectmen
Yeah.
from 3 to 5.
That's
which-
different.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would require a charter change.
That's either a home rule
Charter
petition
commission,
or
yeah.
a charter commission.
Okay.
Anything else, guys?
That's all I have.
I've got nothing. So, informational stuff, Mike, Chris?
No.
Informational, if we're gonna discuss anything about Verizon, I'll have to excuse myself.
I don't think there's anything really to point out. It's in your sheet to read, I think all of them did get mailed to you.
The only question I had was, we have an ISO rating of 4.0. Sounds like a 10 is bad, so I'm guessing a 4 isn't too bad, but I don't know what it means. So the fire protection.
Yeah, we've been through this several times before, and we've been told you're not going to get any higher than a 4 because we don't have a full-time fire department.
Because we don't have a full-time fire department?
It's not
Yes.
staffed to the
It's not
standard
st-
national
Yes, you
standards.
have to meet national standards for staffing levels and.
Higher as in better as in lower, really a lower number.
Yes, this is what they use in evaluating your homeowner's insurance. It's one of the factors that goes into it, the rating. And they use things like, how many feet is it from your house to a nearest fire hydrant?
Right.
Is there a water line in your street? Age of the housing and all of that stuff. They factor in the size of your fire department.
So does that rating affect, I'm interested in the financial impact. That rating affects individual homeowners' insurance policies?
Yes.
Does it affect the
Yes,
cost
it
of
does.
insurance to the town?
No, it
Not
doesn't
really,
really affect the car, because we go through a group, municipal pooled group, so.
It would be interesting to know what the effect on the individual homeowner's insurance is.
Yeah.
Right?
I can have cheap hauling tips.
There's nothing we can do about that, though.
Yeah, that might be something you ask some of the local insurance agents about, if they understand.
I do have a problem with it.
Yeah.
Yes, very expensive.
We did hire a second mechanic for the Public Works garage.
Not yet.
He hasn't been hired,
It's
he's
not- has
been
not been
offered the
hired.
position, he's still being vetted.
Still being vetted.
Okay. And the veterans agent has started work. We're trying to work with him on getting his computer set up and getting what days he's gonna be here, so. but-
Did the issue that Ron flagged about benefits not being paid or?
They're good, checks are going out tomorrow.
Okay.
So, and he's been in touch with the state about reimbursement, and he's getting everything squared away. He's talked to Joy and, the Georgia, and so he's, digging right in. Seems like a very accommodating person and very capable. He wants to go down to the senior center and, visit down there occasionally too, which would be good.
Hold on, Mike, hold on.
Well, I don't know. Not everyone would agree with you on that. So,
Not
which is
everyone is
okay,
here.
which is
Good
fine.
job.
Yeah.
Getting this one done.
Thank you.
So the Medfield Board of Selectmen needs to meet in executive closed session for the following purposes.
And could I ask if
discuss strategy
Yes.
with respect to litigation. I declare, consider the purchase or exchange of real property.
Sarah?
I declare that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigation position of the public body.
I move that the Medfield Board of Selectmen go into executive session for the following purposes: to discuss strategy with respect to litigation, because the open meeting will have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares, and to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property, if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body, and the chair so declares.
And an open meeting, open session.
And that the open session will not reconvene at the conclusion of the executive session.
And could I ask if Sarah opposed to be?
Second. Now it's a roll call, correct?
Right.
On this?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Murby?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Yep.
Mr. Marcucci? Aye.
You can have anybody you want in executive session.
Yeah, you don't have to ask.
You don't have to, okay.
So Sarah, you can stay.
Can we release Courtney
I've
slash
been
Roberta?
released, gentlemen. Have a wonderful evening. I hear you're not getting sued for anything that I am doing, so have at.
Yet.
Yet. I'm trying to keep your feet out of that fire, folks.
And
3 words for you. 10 taxpayers sued.
We got, I don't know, one